Good afternoon. I'd like to call the first meeting of Finance, Ways, and Means Committee for 2023 to order, please. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Barrett, Boyd, Campbell, Camper, Cochran, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Hawk, Hicks, Kiesling, Lambert, Love, Lynn, McKenzie, Miller, Moon, Parkinson, Shaw, Sparks, Whitson, Williams, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Again, welcome to our first meeting. We do have some new members on this committee, but we're not going to do introductions this time. We're going to go straight into our hearings. We will do those when we have our first official regular meeting in a couple of weeks. Right now, are there any personal orders or announcements before we get underway? All right, seeing none, I would just pass on to the committee that our colleague Karen Camper, Leader Camper, is unable to be with us here today. She's in Memphis. There's been a death in her family and also a very close friend that's hospitalized. So we would ask for your prayers for those situations. And with that, without further ado, I see that we have our folks all ready, raring, chomping at the bit to go, but we will hear the Tennessee Housing Development Agency, and Ralph Perry has joined us again, and I will let Mr. Perry introduce those who are with him, and then we'll get straight into his business. Thank you.
Of the Tennessee Housing Development Agency. With me is our Chief Financial Officer, Trent Ridley, and our Controller and Director of Accounting, Joe Brown. You've got our submittals before you. We're happy to address any questions that you have for us this morning. But I thought I'd take just a few minutes here at the start to update you about our work and some of the housing trends that we're seeing around the state. But let me start giving credit where credit is due. The work of these two gentlemen, Mr. Ridley, Mr. Brown, the finance and accounting teams that they lead are responsible for Tennessee Housing having now earned its 20th consecutive clean financial audit from the Comptroller's office. When you consider the amount of money that flows through our agency and the increasing complexity both of our mortgage business and the new and expanded federal programs that we run, this is no small thing. Joe tells me every year that I am jinxing his team by calling attention to the streak, but he's been here throughout it, as has Trent, and they and their team deserve a great deal of credit for that good work. Let me start by giving a little context on our business. This is the year when we really begin to shift our fundamental business model. We're coming up on our 50th anniversary. Throughout that time, we have been almost entirely dependent on issuing bonds, debt, in order to finance the mortgages we make available to Tennesseans. Since you gave us the ability to bring loan servicing in-house 5 years ago, we have established a track record. We have earned seller servicer status with Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, and soon with Fannie Mae as well. And what that does is it gives us the ability to sell and securitize mortgages into the secondary market. Now, here's what that means. It means that rather than having to issue debt in order to buy those mortgages from lenders, what we can do is we use THDA funds. We hold them for a brief period of time, bundle them for sale or securitization into the secondary market. We get our lending capital back. We make profit on the sale, and we get paid to keep servicing those loans. So what that gives us is 3 strong revenue streams instead of just one. It gives us a broader range of mortgage options that we can offer to Tennesseans, and it gives us the operational flexibility to make sure we can stay in the market regardless of economic conditions. And as an additional benefit, since we don't need to use as much bond authority for single-family mortgages, that's a lot more that we can put to work for the development of affordable rental housing. Last year, our investments created or preserved over 7,400 units of affordable housing. Last year, on the home ownership side, was a lot more challenging. Inventory statewide is low, prices are high, demand is high, and of course, interest rates took a big jump early last year. You can tell the big red line on the chart is last year's production. You can tell exactly when those high rates spiked up because that's when our numbers took a dive. Tell you the impact that that has. The family that got the average sized THDA mortgage last year is paying $400 a month more than if they'd gotten that same loan at the interest rate we were able to offer in 2021. And as you can imagine, for a lot of first-time buyers, that $400 a month is enough to knock them out of the market. We're required each year to calculate a housing cost index. We'll present that for our board next week. But essentially, it measures the percentage of an average Tennessean's income that they need to spend for housing. For most of the last decade, that percentage was 28, 29%. Last year, it was 31.4. This year, it is 38.2. Now, I've been around THDA for about 20 years, including my service on the board. This is as high as it's ever been. And certainly, this is as much of a year-to-year increase as I have ever seen. It probably reinforces what you're seeing and hearing as you travel about your districts. Unlike 20 years ago, when the price pressure came as a result of easy money and some dodgy lending practices, this time it's really all about supply and demand. Since that earlier housing crisis, we as a nation have basically gone 15 years not building anywhere near the amount of housing that we need. So what you've got is a low inventory of homes for sale, particularly at entry-level price points. And demand is high, especially in states like ours. We're one of the top 6 destinations for people relocating. So high demand, low supply, that's what your price pressure is coming from. We frankly expect it will take the market a few years to work through those supply issues, and we think that will likely remain a drag on our loan production for a while. The financing tools are there. We're in the market with a competitive rate of interest. We have a very robust package of down payment and closing cost assistance, but those borrowers still have to be able to find a house they can buy at a price that makes sense for them. Now, more encouraging, as the economy improves, people get back to work, we are making rapid progress, reducing the loan delinquency and forbearance rates on our mortgages. We are optimistic that unless the economy takes a dive later this year, we'll be able to bring those back down to where they were before COVID knocked us all for a loop. And in addition to all of this work, of course, we continue to administer now 14 federal programs on the state's behalf, including all the new and expanded things that Washington sent our way over the last couple of years. I want to point out that with the possible exception of our colleagues in Michigan, this is a broader range of program responsibility than any other state housing finance agency in this country. And we view it as a vote of confidence on your part and the governor and your colleagues in the General Assembly. And we work very hard to be worthy of your confidence. So let me pause there and invite any questions that you might have for us.
Thank you, Mr. Perry, for a very cogent presentation. We always appreciate that. And congratulations again on your clean audit and that streak. And hopefully we have not jinxed it and we'll be hearing about the same thing this time next year. But with that, I do have some folks on the list for questions. First on the list is Chairman Williams. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and thank you, Mr. Perry, for coming back. Always great to see you here in finance hearings. Not every day you get to start first, which is kind of nice. I did want to ask you about the low income housing energy assistance program. Last year, I think we had a discussion about it that you were serving about 120,000 people last year, about 120,000 people. I noticed that in the questionnaires this year, it looks like a little over 50,000 people were being served. I wondered, what do you attribute that to? Is it similar to funding? Because it's my understanding that these are grants, and it's not like they're funding.
We got a lot more of that funding source for COVID conditions.
Okay.
And those COVID conditions have lapsed. So that extra money was expended and it's not a recurring grant to us.
So the anomaly here would not be the
Mhm.
the 51,000 that seems low this year. It's just
Right.
that it was high from the
Yes.
previous year.
Exactly.
I guess one of the things that's interesting as the cost of operating and managing
Mhm.
your home continues to go up with inflation, the cost of electric and other things. What are you doing as it relates to this process with the reduction of monies and the ability of monies to spend? How do you communicate with people who might
Mhm.
best use your services? Is it a
Mhm.
marketing program? Or they're doing it through? I mean, how would someone find
Mhm.
out about these
Yeah.
programs?
That the Energy Assistance Program and a number of the others that we have here, we operate those through local agencies, community action, um, developmental districts, various nonprofits, and they have an active program of outreach and engagement. A lot of times they're helping clients with more than one problem. You may need help on your rent, but you're also behind on your utilities. You may be qualifying for some other state assistance. So they handle the intake, and we're funneling the funds to them and collecting appropriate documentation.
I have one.
Mhm.
Chairman Williams.
Of course, as you know, I'm in the construction business, and so the cost of construction is pretty exorbitant over the last 2 years, and particularly, have you seen as with the rise of
Mhm.
inflation now,
Mhm.
coupled with the cost of construction services, or
Mhm.
do you think that plays probably the biggest role as it relates into
Mhm.
how many people you're able to help serve, as it relates to that total number? Is that impacted your ability to do that?
Yeah, almost across the board. I mean, last year, we had to take back the housing tax credits that we had awarded for the prior 2 years and reissue them in larger amounts because of the increase that developers saw in their development costs. We have increased the maximum grant size to nonprofits because their costs are going up.
Mhm.
It's harder to build, it's more expensive to get materials, and sometimes it's just hard to get them. We've got a builder up in Granger County. They're waiting 4 months to get trusses. Can't finish the houses till you get those. So we have adjusted a number of our programs, federal and state, to provide additional funding to offset those higher costs. And of course, on the mortgage side, that's reflected in the amount folks have to borrow. You know, I mentioned our average mortgage size. It's $210,000 statewide now. That is 34% higher than it was in 2019. And, that starts to hit our potential customer as well.
Thank you, Mr. Perry, and I
Mhm.
would be remiss if I didn't say thank you for your support. I serve on the State Habitat
Mhm.
Board, and it's good to see your face there and
Thank
how you guys continue to support those families who are getting a new lot in life a lot of
Mhm.
times through Habitat, and your assistance there has been greatly appreciated.
It's a
Thank you.
great partnership.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you, sir.
Right next on my list, Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Perry, for your
Mhm.
good work on housing and making housing affordable. It's important to a lot of people. I've got questions about your tax credits, the community investment tax credit and the low income tax credit.
Okay.
Over time, we have spent more on or through these tax credits. Of course, that's because the cost per unit has gone up. Overall, are we able to help with these credits finance more units, or is the number of units that we're helping finance actually going down?
I'd have to look at the numbers more closely, but in general, I think it takes more credits to build fewer units just because of the cost. Almost everybody, as I mentioned, that we gave housing tax credits to in 20 and 21, we had to provide additional tax credits into the deal to provide the equity they need to build those. Um, I think I think now developers are just figuring in those higher costs. But yeah, it's inevitable. If you need more credit, cost more per unit, that's going to be a challenge. I can't speak as well to the community investment tax credit because that's more between the lender who actually provides those funds and the nonprofit that would be using them to build. But yeah, everybody's costs are up across the board. It would not surprise me.
Sure. And you've told us a little bit about why some of these
Mhm.
costs are going up. It has to do with higher interest rates, general
Mm-hmm.
price inflation, insufficient supply, increased
Mhm.
demand. Is there anything the government is doing, maybe particularly state government, that
Mhm.
is making this problem worse? Maybe regulations we're imposing that's
Not so
adding?
much at the state, but I think local communities often with the best of intentions, you know, the impact of your zoning, your codes, your regulatory requirements, your permitting press, how long that takes to get through, all of those can make building anything a little more expensive, a little more time consuming, a little more difficult to do. And all of that hits first and hardest at folks who want to build something affordable. If you're a small builder, you're only going to do 10 houses this year. Are you going to build 10 at 200,000 or 10 at 400,000? This is your livelihood. Um, I think the best thing, and what we try to do is just encourage communities that feel they need to have more housing built, is examine what you're requiring, whether that adds cost and complexity. I wouldn't think it a good idea to impose those changes at either the federal or the state level. I think those are conversations properly had at the local level. But, I was struck that the Biden administration is looking at providing financial incentives for communities that modify some of their rules to make it easier to build. And to have that endorsed in an article I read in the American Conservative just last week. Um, Not a lot of agreement typically between those two sources. So I'm thinking that that might be an approach that would have some traction at the local level.
Okay, thank you for that
Mhm.
advice.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Director Perry, it's good to see you and your staff here. Thank you all
Mhm.
for always being accessible whenever I give you a call. Um, you've kind of touched on my question or my thoughts. Looking at the report that you all presented, those numbers, and this kind of blows my mind, from 2015 to 2020, rent has gone up 17.4%,
Mhm.
according to the report, and sales prices on homes have gone up 34.7%. That's
Mhm.
amazing. Um, and we know, especially up in my neck of the woods, low income, affordable housing is needed.
Mhm.
What does that look like across the state from Mountain City to Memphis?
Mhm.
What's the environment?
Almost any community that is growing and attracting is talking to us about, we need to build more housing. Uh, some rural West Tennessee communities, for example, they're looking forward to an influx of jobs and people who want to live there. So we're already planning to target some of our bond and tax credit resources to help that along. East Tennessee, our business has remained pretty good. I mean, it's when I started, East Tennessee was maybe 22% of our mortgage business. Now it's routinely between 35 and 40%. House prices have not accelerated as steeply in much of East Tennessee. There are pockets where that's not the case. Um, we we have a limited amount of resources that we can put toward multifamily development, and only a certain amount that we can put behind nonprofit developers. Um, so there's a limit to what we can do to mitigate cost increases, and that's why I say that's a good thing for local communities to look at. Do you need all the requirements that you put on a builder? I mean, not to pick on Nashville, but you know, they have a common sense rule that if you're going to build lots of units, you need to provide parking. Good idea. I'm for that. But when you apply that to a building that's going to be used to house previously homeless veterans who do not own cars, it adds $500,000 to the project that perhaps you didn't need to spend. So, I encourage communities, look first at what costs you're adding. And then if you've got surplus land that you want to make available at a discount, that makes it a lot easier to put something affordable on it.
And then final question, just kind of changing gears a little bit,
Mhm.
talking about Blue Oval.
Yeah.
What is THDA? What are you guys doing to be prepared
Mhm.
for? I'm sure what's going to turn out to be just a very high demand when it
Yeah,
comes to
we're
the housing.
excited about it, and of course, it takes a few years to ramp up and build these things. we have placed extra emphasis within our bond and tax credit programs so that applicants proposing to build in that general region will score a little better and are more likely to succeed. I think initially, we think most of those are going to come, say, from the west side of Jackson or up around Covington, places that already have some infrastructure, schools, shopping, churches, water, sewer. It will take longer for some of the smaller communities to ramp up for housing, but we're paying a lot of attention to that with our partners and seeing what other assistance we might be able to target there.
All right. Thank you very much, directors. Again,
My
thank
pleasure.
you for being here. Thank you, madam.
Representative Miller, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and thank you all and your team. Good afternoon. I have two questions, but before that, I'd like to preference it with a statement. According to THDA, the agency received $232.4 million in federal emergency rental assistance funding, which provides rental assistance to eligible households who have qualified hardship and fell behind on their rent due to COVID. The agency has expended $50 million of its funding to date and has until September 30th, 2025 to utilize the funds. First question, according to THDA website on January 6, 2023, the COVID-19 rent relief portal was closed to new applications. How many Tennessee households have been served versus how many were denied? First
Well,
question.
let me update on, I'm not sure where you found those first numbers. What the federal government gave us was $715 million, which was more, we said at the time, that's more than we were ever going to need. We stopped using the ERA-1 money, which was more restrictive and had shorter time frames, so that we could start using the ERA-2 money, confident that we could meet the spend down requirements, and then we get to repurpose the leftover money for other things like eviction prevention and housing development. We closed that portal. I mean, there are still Tennesseans who need some help with rent, but that is not because of COVID, not anymore. So we are one of the last southern states to close their portal to new applicants. Anyone who's in the portal now, we will work through and we will honor whatever assistance they are required to give. But now that program has pretty well run its course. You asked about the total numbers. We shifted almost $152 million to the 4 localities that ran their own program, including Shelby. We have paid over $154 million to applicants, and we have helped over almost 29,000 families. You know, I don't blame the federal government. You know, nobody quite knew what we were facing with COVID, and there were experts warning us that we were going to have 200,000 applicants. We never got anywhere close to that. The states elsewhere in the country that shut everything down and threw everybody out of work for a year and a half, they need all this money. In Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, that was never the case here. But those who are eligible during this period, we have been able to help. Not everyone who applied was eligible. And we have about $71 million now that we can repurpose to support eviction prevention programs around the state. And we're going to make about 30, 40 million available to develop housing for very low income citizens.
Second question, and actually you've answered part of the second question, but in the beginning you said the numbers were wrong. I mentioned 232 million. And what was that number that you?
Well, the total,
say
because
that was
remember,
factual?
there were two bills that created the emergency rent relief. And they came within 3 months of each other. And of course, they had different rules. But the total that they assigned to Tennessee was 715 million. And there was no possibility that we were ever going to need that much for rent relief. So we decided the first tranche was time limited and more restrictive. We couldn't possibly meet the spend down requirements required with that. So we shifted and used the second tranche, which gave us more flexibility, more time to put them to work. And we had the notice that if we met our spending targets, the money left over we can use for things we think are more important for Tennesseans. So that was attractive to me.
Okay. So again, the
Mhm.
remaining federal dollars,
Mhm.
what is that amount? And
We have 71 million
71 million.
that we're going to repurpose, and we're holding another 62 to make sure that all those who are in the
Okay.
pipeline right now can be accommodated.
And is it a timeline on the
Yeah,
spending these
we have
dollars?
plenty of time. We will work through everybody that is in the system now. That's our
Okay.
promise.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Sticking with the COVID programs and the things that I know last year THDA received expansion up to 33
Mhm.
individuals to run these COVID programs.
Mhm.
How many of those programs are still in place, and what is the expected time that they will expire?
Mhm. All of them are currently in place. We have stopped taking new applications for rent assistance, but we probably have several months of processing to remain. We expect to be scaling that down by the middle of this year. The Homeowner Assistance Fund, they've actually run that program into 2026. I can't imagine that we will want to keep it open that long, but what we get to do with that money will be up to the feds. HUD took so long to craft rules for programs like Home ARP and the Water and Sewer Bill program that we are just now able to get them started. They announced it with a lot of fanfare, but then took a year to give us the rules. So those two are just getting started. In some of these other instances, we had a one-time infusion of money like the Energy Assistance Program that Chairman Williams mentioned, and we're back basically now to normal operations. We've had to staff up in accounting. We've had to staff up in IT to make sure that we can properly track and account for all those dollars. My working expectation is that over the next 2 to 4 years, all of these COVID programs will have run their course unless the federal government, changes its mind about something, which is entirely possible.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Director Perry, you said something there about you had to hire people for the IT and some out of those 33 positions that was allocated, how many of those are filled at this time?
I think all the ones devoted to those federal programs we have filled. We've had to do some backfilling because in some cases we promoted people into those jobs. In a normal year, our turnover, we've probably got 25 or 30 positions posted at any one time. That's, a lot of entry-level jobs coming open. We have at least 24 positions posted right now, but we moved very quickly to position people into the jobs that we needed to manage all that extra federal money. We're right on top of that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam
Thank
Chair
you.
Lady.
Thank you. I do have additional questioners on the list. I'm going to ask, we're over time. So I'm going to ask that the questioners would be brief, and I would ask that the answers be as brief as possible while being complete, obviously.
Yes, ma'am.
Next on the list, Representative Lynn.
Hi there. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was wondering about the two programs up there, the Family Self-Sufficiency Program and then the Housing Choice Vouchers. If you could just very quickly tell us about that. Sometimes these programs are helpful to our constituents,
Certainly.
and I just wanted to learn more about it.
Housing Choice Vouchers, we administer the voucher program in about 70 Tennessee counties, generally outside the major metro areas. East Tennessee is covered. We run that voucher program just like the public housing authorities would. And we try to put extra emphasis on the counties that we uniquely serve. Family self-sufficiency is a small subset of that. It helps prepare folks for self-sufficiency. There are some other aspects to it in terms of individual savings accounts and training, education, that sort of thing. Be glad to send you more if you'd like to see it.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director, good to see you.
Thank you, sir.
So talking with members here in this group and just with people, met with several mayors recently, housing is a major situation, not just in my area in East Tennessee, but throughout. there's a greater demand than there is places. That's the first thing I see. Second thing I see is the cost to rent.
Mhm.
It is made it to where the average person who's making $40,000-$50,000 a year, some of our greatest Tennesseans, whether it's a school teacher or a firefighter, EMS worker, it's really difficult. Talking to my friend right here from just north of here, $500,000 in Goodlettsville just for a moderate house.
Mhm.
So I have a question. Don't mean to put you on the spot, but I do have a question. Historically, and members, y'all need to know this, President Reagan came up with this notion of tax incentives to help low-income housing developments be owned and operated by the private sector. I've carried a bill several times because the only incentive in Tennessee, when we offer a private organization that we tax these incentives. It's crazy to me. In your professional opinion, if you're allowed, would it not help our housing situation and our rent problem if we would quit taxing the tax incentive to a private company who's building low-income housing developments?
Well, anything that'll reduce costs would certainly be helpful. I would say, and we both painfully learned from experience, but I think between the appraisals and developers, they have worked out a reasonable compromise. And generally what happens now is developers are proactive in working with their local community and working out payment in lieu of tax agreements that mitigate what would otherwise be a pretty significant upfront tax liability. The tax credits are a great resource. We are hopeful that this year Congress finds a vehicle for legislation that would increase the amount they give us. Actually, I think there is a reasonable chance that every single member of the Tennessee congressional delegation will be on that bill this year, spend a little time in Washington. This is a genuinely bipartisan measure. They just haven't found the right vehicle. That would be enormously helpful. It also makes some changes to what we can do with bonds that would let us use the same amount of bonds for perhaps half again as many developments. That would help us build more of the kind of housing you're talking about.
Chairman Faison, your final question.
Yeah. Oh. So that's encouraging that there's more tax incentives coming. But want to come back and circle back around. If we're continuing to tax even the more tax incentives, are we not still going to get what we've got? Now, obviously, we know in Shelby County, they've worked it out with developers there, and they're not taxing the tax incentives like they're doing that through other parts of the state.
Most places, it has been a long, long time since a developer came to me with that kind of problem. I think in most cases, they've been able to work that out. And I don't think we need to wade into that particular issue again.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair Lady. There's a national trend of outside investors and hedge fund owners that are purchasing up all of the inventory in markets across the country. There's also the addition that I just learned, the use of an app where a lot of them are members tied to this app where they decide on what the rental rates are going to be for certain markets. This situation has created a false inflation for many markets, Memphis being one. As an owner of properties, I've watched how the rental prices have, in some cases, have doubled, literally doubled in the last 2 years in the Memphis market. But the pay rates have not increased with this false inflation. And so there's a false inflation being created. Of course, the employers will have to increase rates in order for people to be able to afford housing, thus increasing the prices of products to consumers, thus creating a really, truly false inflation in markets across the country. How does that affect you, and what can be done to stop this trend as it's hitting Tennessee?
Yeah. Well, the first part is easy. If people are buying up homes in large quantities and holding them for rental rather than making them available for sale, that reduces the available inventory. That's going to hurt our customer. What can be done about it is much more complicated. I mean, you can't really tell someone they can't sell their home to someone who's ready to give them cash today, no questions asked. There are some proposals that some national groups are looking at in Washington that would change certain tax laws on the way those hedge funds are allowed to write off borrowing that they use to make those investments. I can't really handicap where that's going right now. But one thing we are doing in Memphis, in partnership with our partners at Convergence Memphis, we're trying to raise a certain amount of money that would let our nonprofit partners, in some cases, move quickly to buy a home in a target neighborhood before the investors get to it, and then hold that for resale to someone who's really going to live there. It's a small thing that might be done, but it's a larger problem in Memphis. I think parts of Murfreesboro are seeing an awful lot of investor purchases now too.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, well, you are.
Representative Sparks, you will wind us up.
I'll make it quick, Chairman. A few years ago, I ran a resolution just bringing out the awareness of excessive regulation, taxes, fees, the cost of just taxes and fees and permits to build a new home. This was according to National Home Builders Association, probably 2016 report. It was about $85,000 in just that. I had something, we know we've got some new members. I want them to hear this because housing is a serious issue in all of our communities, whether it's Memphis or Mountain City, and I know it is in Smyrna, Tennessee. A few years ago, the county commission was looking at mandating sprinkler systems. Sounds good, sprinkler system. We're going to save everybody from fires. I go up there and speak about it, and I took a poll, and I want the members to hear this. And I said, raise your hand if you have a sprinkler system in your own home. The chairman didn't have a sprinkler system. The building codes director didn't have a sprinkler system. The fire chief didn't have a sprinkler system. You know who had the sprinkler systems? The two lobbyists in the audience. So we've got to really look at these unfunded mandates to housing. It's serious. When I've got people calling me that can't find a place to live, it's extremely serious. Speaking of sprinkler system, a lady just called me with a business. She said, well, I've got to get all these permits and stuff. I said, well,
Representative Sparks, if we could kind of wind this up.
$50,000 is what she's estimating for a sprinkler system in a small commercial building. That's alarming. Everybody needs to be worried about that and be fired up to stop some of this implications. It's affecting the average person now. Thank you.
Mr. Ferry, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for the work that's been done. I know in some ways it seems like a finger in the dike, trying to hold back the ocean because there's such a growing demand, and the supply side, as you said, is going to take a while to catch up. But we appreciate everything that your organization does to move that needle forward and help Tennesseans find adequate housing. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
We're going to ask that Mr. Thomas and the Alcohol Beverage Commission people come forward. And since we are running a little bit behind, okay. Just note that next on our agenda will be, we'll be hearing from the Public Utility Commission, so I'll ask that they would be standing at the ready. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you.
recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee for having us here today. My name is Russell Thomas. I'm the Executive Director of the Tennessee Alcoholic Beverage Commission. I'm joined today to my right, to your left, by our Assistant Director, Tabitha Blackwell. To my left, to your right, Aaron Rummage, our Director of Policy, Legislation, and Communication. And on the other end, John Jordan, our Fiscal Director. As you know, we regulate the alcohol industry in Tennessee. We enforce the alcohol laws in Title 57 and other provisions throughout the code. We're here today presenting our budget requests for the upcoming fiscal year to support our mission to protect public safety, ensure a fair collection of taxes, and provide a stable marketplace, which we ensure adherence to through our licensing and permitting process, our regulatory inspections, and our law enforcement investigations. Taking a look at our budget from a high level, the budget request for the fiscal year 23-24 is right at $11.7 million. We are fortunate to be an agency that is funded completely with current services revenue. We don't require state appropriations from the budget to fulfill our duties. We project in the current fiscal year that we're not closed in yet, that we will bring in about $12.7 million from these categories of revenue. The largest portion of that by far are our license and permit fees. That makes up about roughly 10 million of that $12.7 million. Next, we receive a 15-cent per case fee that results in about 1.8 million of our funding. We have various other funding sources. Together, they combine for less than $200,000 of the funding, but some of those include some interdepartmental funds, Governor's Highway Safety Office, some funds from the federal government related to some joint task force that we operate with them. Looking at our expenses, our largest category of expenses, salary and benefits, about 6.3 million of those total expenditures, and then 4.1 are operational expenditures. Those are things, like rent and hardware, et cetera. We have met and exceeded our reversion target in recent years and are fully confident that we will do the same in 23-24. That's a $500,000 reversion target. In addition to funds that we will revert from our budget, that we do revert on an annual basis, we also collect fines. Those pass directly to the general fund. No fine money that we collect goes to our agency. All fines we collect go to the state general fund, not part of our operating budget. A little bit of our staffing at a glance. We have 90 positions. We have 3 part-time commissioners, 1 from each grand division of the state, 87 full-time staff. Currently, we have 4 vacant positions. I think we actually got down to 1 or 0 over Thanksgiving, but Mr. Rummage said I had to give it as of the day we turned this in. Within those numbers, about 32 of those work in administration or license processing, 55 on the law enforcement side. Some of those are sworn law enforcement officers. Some of those are non-sworn inspectors. We have approximately 20% of our staff are veterans, and all of our law enforcement agents meet the post requirements. Some of our activities at a glance. As you can see, we stay busy with both our licensing and enforcement activities. Some of these numbers include over 47, almost 48,000 permits and licenses issued a year, fielding over about 30,000 phone calls, conducting over 10,000 inspections across the state, over 2,600 routine minor compliance checks. Our law enforcement side investigated over 900 complaints in the most recent year, issued over 2,000 regulatory citations, and opened and investigated over 400 criminal matters. Every year, we like to give you a summary of our license activity. Recent years have shown significant growth in the number of alcohol licenses issued. This trend appears to continue. We are happy to see that more Tennessee businesses are opening than are closing. This is also reflected in tax revenue that we've seen. I'll wrap up our presentation with that. I just want to, again, thank you for having us, and thank you. A couple budget cycles ago, y'all helped us add some additional staff. All of those came online, have been working for just about a year now, and that has been a great help to our commission, and we appreciate that.
And we appreciate the positive impact on the budget from your organization. First on my list with questions, Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to you guys. Director, let me just say real quickly, during the pandemic, I wore Aaron out with calls, as I'm sure many of us did, with all the questions, and you guys, he was fantastic to respond. We appreciate you guys and how responsive you've been, especially during that 2-year period where we had delivery wine and liquor by the drink and all these things that our restaurateurs were trying to adjust to. So appreciate you guys. Quick question related to the legislation we passed last year requiring the common carrier to obtain a license if they're going to deliver wine. Can you tell us if anybody, I know we're 17, 18, 19 days into this. Has anybody applied for that license yet? And then part 2, have you had any challenges preparing for this rollout of January 1st?
Thank you. That's a great question, Chairman Zachary. We've been in contact with the country's 2 largest common carriers, FedEx and UPS. We have a good working relationship with them. They're in the pipeline. We did have to prepare for that, and hands off to STS, who provides our IT services, that we're able to make those changes to our licensing system to get that up and running before the new year, well in advance of the new year. So we are ready to handle that. Those agencies, FedEx and UPS, they have, pursuant to some other legislation from a few years back, supply us a lot of data that's very helpful with us to regulate the shipping market.
Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the testimony. I know, as Chairman Zachary just spoke to, the pandemic presented its own unique challenges. One of the ways that your agency adapted to that was offering online training for serving permits. I think you mentioned last year that you were going to continue that. So has the commission seen a continued increase in online training popularity? I mean, is that something folks are still using a lot?
Yes, they are. Any further comments? Our Assistant Director Blackwell is very involved in the training program process.
They do remain popular. We haven't had many new.
Excuse me, if you would just for the record identify yourself, please.
Of course. My name is Tabitha Blackwell, Assistant Director of the ABC. Yeah, we haven't had many new online programs certified in the last 2 years, but we do offer, I think there are about 20 that are already certified. And we're definitely seeing a trend of more students taking those than the classroom programs.
Did you have follow-up?
Yes, ma'am. Just a couple quick follow-ups. And so a server permit currently it's valid for 5 years from the date of issuance. Does the commission monitor those expirations, or is that the duty of the server or the employer?
So generally, that's the duty of the server. We expect the employer to also keep a copy on hand and to notice when those expire. But in our system, it's not something like a license where we would send out a renewal notice. It's just incumbent upon the server to know to get a new permit when that time's up.
And then just one other quick follow-up. Are there any other trainings which the commission offers online other than what you mentioned earlier, or is that?
So we do have, it's similar to the server training. We call it responsible vendor training, and it's for retail clerks. So it's meant for clerks that sell at off-premises locations like your convenience stores, your grocery stores. But yes, those programs are offered online as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This side of the committee had a lot of questions at this juncture, so thank you. Just a couple questions on reserves. Yes, Madam Chairman, we try to stick together. So just a couple questions on reserves. I mean, last year, your alcohol server responsibility and training program had a reserve of about 6.1 million. It's gone down by a little bit less than $1 million to 5.2. Can you provide any details on how that was utilized in the last year, and then also any future projects to potentially utilize that reserve?
Yes. So the legislature created that reserve for us a number of years ago, as we looked toward modernizing our organization from a paper-based system to a modern digital based system. And those funds are intended for us. We are directed to use those for technology improvements. And that is what you are seeing a big investment of over the last couple of years. So those funds were used for several technology projects, one of the largest. So we moved our licensing system online to a digital system several years ago. And then last year, we've done that on our law enforcement side. We have launched a new records management system on our law enforcement side. That was a big project over the last 12 to 18 months. And we do have several projects in the pipeline. One of that we'll be launching soon as an example is an enhanced features through the MyTN app, the state mobile experience for citizens to use as a portal to interact with government. We are one of the things that we are going to do is be able for our permitted servers across the state, which there are about 130 to 50,000 of those, we'll be able to have a digital permit. A minute ago, we referenced a paper copy of those. In the very near future, any of those servers with either an Apple or Android phone will be able to have a digital copy of that in their phone wallet.
Leader Lambert.
So I'm going to assume then that all of that you've mentioned costs roughly $900,000. And then how much are the future projects that you're anticipating? How much of that reserve do you anticipate that'll utilize?
I anticipate that we will probably reduce the reserve a little bit more over the next year or two with kind of the projects we have, the long range tech projects we have planned with STS. We've actually kind of been in some discussions about that recently, but we think that we will probably hit a level of maintaining kind of a standard balance, either 2 years out or 3 years out from looking at those long range plans.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you. And that was what I was hoping for. Obviously, that reserve then would dictate some of the other fees that you all do charge that helps build that reserve up. And we always like to keep an eye on that. Kind of a much smaller reserve, but one that we're interested in. The Responsible Vendor Certification Fund has a balance of about $13,000. That's not a lot of money, but it is kind of an unusual balance to see. What's going on with that, and why $13,000 there?
I'll let our fiscal director kind of explain what that is and why we have that fund.
Jonathan Jordan, the fiscal director for the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. So the Responsible Vendor Reserve is set up this last year as a little under $13,000, and those would be for expenses strictly for the Responsible Beer Vendor Program. So as of right now, we don't have any plans to utilize that fund for those specific expenses and requirements for that reserve.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And my last question for this entity. So does the ABC have any, intent to do anything with that, or is that $13,000 just going to sit there in perpetuity? Is it ever going to revert back, or is it just going to kind of sit there? Is it going to grow? Is it going to shrink? Is it going to just sit there as it is? Just kind of a small amount on the balance sheet that sticks out at you?
It is kind of a small program within our agency. It's a little bit unusual. In Tennessee, our agency doesn't regulate beer. That's done mostly at the local level, but the legislature did task us with overseeing this responsible vendor program. So we do have some tech-related projects to enhance some features for the people that we do work with that. We very well would use that money. Honestly, we'll probably spend more than those funds to make those enhancements.
And Representative Sparks, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. According to the ABC's questionnaire, the commission has created an ABC Tennessee app with MyTN. The total project was about $450,000, and the project completion is about 96%. Can you tell us where the app is now and its purpose of serving Tennesseans?
We do actually have an app working now, and it has been for some time. Anyone can go on that app and do searches for license and permit information. So that can be people in the industry, business owners, or it could be just members of the public. The feature that I mentioned a few minutes ago is just the next additional feature that we will be launching that will allow use of that phone wallet feature to display those two items. And some of the next steps that we hope to implement would be to bring in more of the customer experience, the things that Tennessee citizens have to do to get licensed with us, to get permitted with us, to build those features into the app, to make the process as easy and seamless, as quick as we can for those Tennessee citizens.
All right, I don't have anyone else on my list, so we thank you for. Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman Whitson, I didn't see your hand. You can thank.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Just real quick, Director, I just want to thank you and your staff, especially Aaron, for helping us resolve a problem with our Veterans Foreign War chapter down in Williamson County. Your staff was very responsive, and I appreciate what y'all did to resolve that.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And again, thank you for being here, but as has been alluded to by more than one of our members, you all have been very responsive. I know your organization, because of COVID and all the restrictions and the changes in the ways people did business, you all had to change the way you did business a great deal, and we appreciate your flexibility. And I think because of the work that you all were involved in, we were able to keep some businesses open in Tennessee that would have otherwise probably have gone under and might not have been able to open again. So thank you for that work, and then all of the work that you do on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Appreciate you coming. Next on our list, we have Chairman Hilliard and the Tennessee Public Utility Commission, who are moving forward. Good afternoon, Chairman and crew. Welcome to the Finance Committee for 2023, and we will just let you get started with your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair Hazelwood and members of the committee. Can you hear me? How about now? All right. Again, thank you, Chairperson Hazelwood and members of the committee. It's an honor to come before you today and present the Tennessee Public Utilities Commission budget. My name is Herb Hilliard, and I am currently chairman of the commission. Joining me today is Samantha Lamon, who's our chief financial officer, and Tim Schwartz, who's our chief communications officer. Earl Taylor, our director, was going to join us, but unfortunately he came down ill, so he will not join us today. I'm going to provide an overview of the commission as well as share our proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget and highlight some of the commission's activities. The Tennessee Public Utilities Commission in various forms has been in existence since 1897. Predecessor agencies of the current commission include the Tennessee Regulatory Authority, the Tennessee Public Youth Service Commission, and its earliest form, the Tennessee Railroad Commission. The commission is responsible for the oversight of investor-owned public utilities that provide natural gas, electric, water, and wastewater services to over 1 million Tennessee residential consumers and 60,000 commercial and industrial customers. The General Assembly has charged the agency with ensuring that the utilities on its jurisdiction provide safe, reliable, and essential utility service at rates that are just and reasonable. The process by which reasonable rates are established is comprehensive and transparent. Discovery pleadings and deliberations are conducted in accordance with the State Uniform Administrative Procedures Act. Public notice and participation are vital components and determine a reasonable rate of return that is in the best interest of the utilities and the customers it serves. The setting of rates includes an opportunity for a utility to request an alternate rate mechanism in lieu of a general rate case proceeding. These alternate methods allow for a more streamlined rate setting process and enable the utility to avoid a lengthy and expensive general rate case proceeding. The commission is also responsible for the safe and reliable distribution and transmission of intrastate natural gas pipeline facilities. Our Gas Pipeline Safety Division conducts annual audits of natural gas providers as well as perform intrastate gas pipeline safety inspections. We inspect over 40,000 miles of distribution and transmission lines that provide service to over 1.1 million Tennesseans. We're also pleased with the recent passage of a bill to improve our underground utility damage prevention program, which furthers our mission to provide safe and reliable utility service to Tennesseans. The commission also processes applications for utilities to provide specific services, which includes a review of the technical, managerial, and financial ability of new and established utilities. Requests to provide an expanded service, resolving certain disputes between telecommunications service providers, as well as 2 consumer programs geared toward assisting the disabled community in Tennessee, the Telecommunications Devices Access and Relay Program, and the Deaf Blind Equipment Distribution Program. The commission also serves as a forum to receive consumer complaints against regulated entities and seeks to facilitate the amicable resolution of such complaints. And last but not least, we oversee the state's Do Not Call program. We are a unique state government. We're unique in state government in that we are one of a small number of self-funded entities, meaning that we are not funded through the general fund. Our budget is a continuation of fiscal year 22-23 budget with no new funding requests. It is funded through a dedicated mix of fees collected from regulated entity and federal reimbursements, and reimbursements from state and private entities for expenses related to services provided by the agency. The proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget for the commission is $10 million. This reflects approximately $9 million in state funds and $1 million in federal funds. The state funds are derived from utilities under our commission's jurisdiction and revenues dedicated to supporting communication services for the hearing impaired. The federal funds support the Gas Pipeline Safety Program, the Deaf Blind Equipment Distribution Program, and the Underground Utility Damage Prevention Program. We appreciate the opportunity to present our budget and highlight some of the agency's efforts to improve the lives of the citizens of this state. The Tennessee Public Utility Commission continues to streamline its activities to deliver services to the utilities and taxpayers in the state in an efficient, effective, and customer-focused manner. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chairman Hillard, and please give our best to Mr. Tiller. We hope that he recovers quickly, but we'll tell him that you did an amazing job in his absence. So, again, thank you for the kind of look back at the evolution of this agency. Those of us who have dealt with the commission in other lives, in other forms, and as technology and other things have evolved, the agencies continue to do so, but with the overall goal and purpose always being to make sure that the citizens of Tennessee are getting what they need to get from their utility providers. So we thank you for the work that you do in that area. We do have some questions, beginning with Representative, or I think I need to say Chairman Campbell, our newest Assistant Caucus Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. Good to see you. My question is around the Underground Utility Damage Enforcement Board specifically. What actions are taken by the board after receiving a complaint? And I'll follow up with that with all the construction growth and all the things happening. Have there been an increase in the number of complaints? Thank you.
I'll ask Mr. Schwartz to respond to that.
Tim Schwartz, Tennessee Public Utility Commission. We provide.
Push.
I thought it was
on off button, on off button, on off button.
Does that work? Can you? Okay. Sorry about that. Tim Schwartz, Tennessee Public Utility Commission. We provide investigative and administrative support to the Damage Prevention Board. We have seen a number of complaints increase. I think our next board meeting is the end of this month, and they've had the largest number of complaints that they're going to hear to date since the inception of the board. So I think there is economic activity out there that's driving up the increased hits and damages. Bring forward.
And lastly, has the 811 system been helpful? And I know people are encouraged to call before they dig. I've heard that on many radio stations and things across Tennessee. Thank you.
Yes, that is not part of our commission or the board, but we do work well with 811. It's a nonprofit. They are very active with the board and with the Public Utility Commission to promote public safety. It has been a very effective tool. The board has worked with 811 in issuing grants for education and outreach to improve public safety as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next on the list, and I want to enunciate clearly, our previous questioner was Assistant Caucus Chair Campbell. If I didn't speak clearly, I do apologize. Our next questioner is our caucus chairman, Faison.
Thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies, for being here. Where I'm from over in East Tennessee, people are constantly frustrated trying to get answers on the phone, especially when it comes to rates and issues dealing with public utilities. And they just want to be able to reach a person and actually get a question. So my question to y'all is, can you provide details on your process for overseeing customer complaints regarding utility service or the rates?
Now, are you talking about service from the providers?
Yes, sir.
You want to talk to me? Yeah.
Tim Schwartz, Public Utility Commission. We do process probably 1,000 complaints per year, many of which are not associated with the utilities that we do regulate. When they are utilities that we have jurisdiction over, we coordinate. We don't really, in many cases, can process some of them, but we work with the utilities to help facilitate a resolution with those customers. If it's not a utility that we have jurisdiction over, which there's a lot of confusion, who do we regulate, who do we not regulate? But we do try to work with the different associations, whether it's the cooperatives, the utility districts, or the municipals, to try to coordinate communication and resolution.
Also, I as chairman, I get a lot of letters from people complaining, and a lot of over half of them are not from utilities that we regulate. And I'm sure you're aware, we do not regulate co-ops or municipals.
All right. Chairman Faison, does that complete your question? All right, thank you. Representative Lynn.
Hi, thank you for being here today with us. I was wondering about your programs for blind Tennesseans. How does the commission advertise the availability of programs for these citizens in our state?
I'll turn that to Mr. Schwartz.
Tim Schwartz, Public Utility Commission. Yes, we have an outreach coordinator that goes across the state, and actually during the pandemic was doing very innovative ways to try to reach people that might need these services through Zoom and other IT-related means. So we do try to extend those services to the extent that we can.
Is there any way that we can ensure that all Tennesseans who are eligible for these services can better learn about them? I mean, we'd be very happy to help make sure
Absolutely.
people hear. Bring us your ideas.
Yes, I'm happy to schedule an appointment with you and with the caucus, both caucuses, and do some introductions with our staff and see what we can do to help.
That'd be great. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Right. I don't see any further questions, but I do have one because I would venture to say there's nobody on this panel that doesn't get calls on a fairly regular basis about do not call. And we put our names on do not call, we put our numbers on do not call, and we still get calls. And there are reasons for that. But for the record, could you, for those watching and listening today, could you help us understand the do not call program and what limitations there are and the ways that you actually, how it can impact and what restrictions, I guess there are, that keep you from being able to perhaps make it work every time?
First, I'll start and then I'll let Mr. Schwartz talk. Unfortunately, the first thing I'll tell you, it's not going to work every time. They're constantly using technology to get around the things that are already in place. We have gotten some help, and I think you may have seen this now from the FCC in getting the providers, the AT&Ts of the world, to, when you get calls now, it'll show up as spam when it comes across on your telephone. There are also apps out there you can put on your cell phones, but you can be on the registry. There are exemptions to people who can call you, who can get around the registry. There are those who will never register, who may not even be in the United States, who call you. So there's never going to be a perfect solution to that problem. So with that, I'll see if Tim has anything else.
Tim Schwartz, Utility Commission. The Do Not Call program, I think, works pretty well for those that that utilize it. We have about 5,500 Tennesseans that are on the registry. We have 200 approximately telemarketers that register with the commission, and we average about 350 complaints per year. The way this program works is if you're a legitimate telemarketer, you are going to seek a do not call list from the commission, and this program pays for itself. So they will pay a fee to be listed as a lawful telemarketer. And then where enforcement comes is if we get a complaint, we will investigate it, see if it's a registered telemarketer or not. And when there's violations, we will take appropriate enforcement action. But more often than not, a lot of the issues that we get complaints about are robocalls or spoofing. That's something we do not have jurisdiction over. In those instances, if we do get complaints like that, we try to refer them to we'll ask who their provider is and try to see if they can, we can coordinate some kind of communication between the two to see if they can take any steps to help them.
One more comment from me. We do not regulate the telecommunications providers. But one of the things I've had conversations with the FCC is that if someone calls you, if you can't call them back, then those calls should never go through. And if you'll notice, most of the ones who call you that you don't want to hear from, if you try to dial them back, you can't dial back to them.
And I get one further question on this issue, again, just for those people at home who might be listening and be frustrated at the calls they're getting on their cell phone or home phone or whatever. If you register on the do not call list, how often do you have to do that? Annually, or once you put your name and number on there, is it there forevermore until you take it off? How does that work?
It should be in there in perpetuity, but oftentimes we'll take constituent calls from members, and we will verify to make sure that number is on the do not call list. If it is not on the do not call list, we will make sure to help them, walk them through that process, or even fill out the application for them to make sure that it is. But we do try to verify every instance we get.
In practicality, I try to do mine at least once every 2 years.
All right, thank you. Well, we've collected a couple of other questioners. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I got the perfect answer for you. Do not call, do not answer.
Does that mean when you call me, I shouldn't answer either?
First of all, Mr. Chairman, if you want me, you'll text me and tell me you called.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just to be clear on the do not call, does it include text as well at this juncture where it's basically do not contact, or has it gone to that juncture, to that point?
Yeah. Actually, I'm not sure. I don't think it includes text. And we'll find that out and let you know. But I'm not sure about that.
If you don't mind, just follow up my office and just, shoot me an email or something like that, or give us a call and let me know whether or not it includes text at this point. I know that had been discussed at one point, but I wanted to know whether or not that had gone through, because that has become kind of the new way. I don't know if anybody else has had this occur, but I've had plenty of constituents that have contacted me that says someone will text them wanting to buy their house, and many times it's not even their house.
Yeah.
I mean, it's become kind of the new, I guess, telemarketing ploy is to text message.
Well, and part of it also is technology changes so fast that you guys passed great laws to try to help stop this, but by the time you got it passed, technology's changed, and so they found another way around it. Because I think emails are a big issue too, that you get excessive amount of emails, and I do have to apologize to Representative Shaw. I'm always happy to take your phone calls.
All right, again, I believe that has completed questions for real this time, but we thank you for coming today. And again, best wishes for Mr. Tiller's recovery quickly. And thank you for the work that you do. And I personally would just express even greater appreciation for anything else you can do on the do not call list. As Representative Shaw has stated, I often do not answer, but there are those of our constituents out there, particularly some who are older, who don't have caller ID and have a landline. And my mother, who doesn't live in this state, but she wears herself out answering the phone, but from telemarketers, but she's okay with that some days because she said that's the only call she gets other than me. So, but again, we thank you for, it's just a real irritant to a lot of people. Thanks so much.
We agree with you. Thank you. Thank you all.
We are going to hear next from our TASSER organization. We'd ask them to be coming forward.
How are you?
Good afternoon and welcome. Dr. Lippert, if you'd like to introduce those yourself and those with you today, and then just go straight into your presentation.
Very good. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Lady Hazelwood, members of the committee. I am Cliff Lippert. I'm the Executive Director of the Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations, or TASSER. With me today, I have our Deputy Executive Director, Melissa Brown, and our Director of Administration, Michael Timmy. Hopefully, you all recall that TASSER serves as a forum for the discussion and resolution of intergovernmental problems. And since the last time we spoke before this committee, we've completed 6 studies. Those include a study on dedications of properties along existing rights-of-way, study on childhood obesity, a study on water recreation resources and resource management, a study on electric vehicles, a study on the tangible personal property tax in Tennessee, and a study on the post-awards grant process in Tennessee. We hope that at our next meeting, which is actually the end of next week, we will conclude 4 additional studies. These include our annual public infrastructure needs inventory, our study on Tennessee Valley Authority payments in lieu of taxes, a comprehensive study on litter in Tennessee, and a study on reference-based pricing as it relates to healthcare services in Tennessee. In addition to those, we have also completed our fiscal capacity calculation for this past year. Of course, that was for the BEP, and we'll continue to calculate that going forward for TISA. And we have 4 additional studies that are still in progress. Those include a comprehensive study on past transportation in Tennessee. We'll have that complete in July. A study on solar utility, which will be complete in September, and 2 smaller studies that did not have a due date from the General Assembly, but we will complete before next session. That includes a study on E911 on college campuses, or emergency communication services on college campuses, and also a study on issues related to liquor by the drink in Tennessee. Our budget request for this year is $3,791,500. Only 4% of that comes from direct state appropriations, $163,000, and we have no requested improvements this year. Chair Lady, that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to take any questions the committee may have.
All right, thank you so much. And we do have questions. If I can get to the correct list. Chairman Williams, I believe you're first.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairlady Hazelwood. Dr. Lippert, great to see you and the staff. Just wanted to congratulate you on your hard work. I know one of the things that we're going to talk about a lot this year is electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. And I know you and your staff, and David, have worked diligently over the past year studying electric vehicles. And this, in the Appropriations Subcommittee, we studied it. I think we did it in budget hearings and in full finance as well. And so we're going to hear a lot about that. I think it would be interesting for the members to hear if you have that information. If not, you can distribute it to us about, I think there were several recommendations that your folks made as it related to electric vehicles. I think what's interesting for the members and for me in particularly is this is a snapshot of what, not just what they've studied, but also how it, the roles play with each local government entity as well as the state. So if you had those, it'd be great if you shared. If not, you can distribute those. But their findings very similar to those that we found in our studies here. But obviously, there was a bifurcation between hybrid and electric. But if you have any of that information, love for you to share it. If not, if you could distribute it to the members, that'd be good.
I'm happy to, Charlie. Yes. So our primary finding in that study was that while the electric vehicles and the increased adoption of electric vehicles is having an effect on revenue in Tennessee, it's not been a major effect so far, but we expect it will be a major effect as the adoption of electric vehicles continues to grow. What's having a more of effect right now is inflation and increased fuel efficiency in vehicles. So our main recommendation from the study, and this is similar to some other recommendations that are, like you said, are floating around out there right now, is that we increase the fee on electronic vehicles to make it more comparable to the amount that's actually paid by people driving traditional gas-powered vehicles, gas or diesel, and that we also recommended that the funds for those be allocated in a similar manner. In other words, shared with local governments. Currently, while the gas tax is shared with local governments, county and city governments in the state, electronic vehicle fees are not. And so we recommend that those also be shared in a similar way. We also recommend that Tennessee consider charging a higher fee on plug-in hybrid vehicles, because currently we do not have a higher fee on them than we do on traditional gas vehicles. And most states that do have a higher fee on electric vehicles also have a higher fee on plug-in hybrids. So those are our main recommendations. And then just more generally, and I thought this was interesting, the last speaker talked about how changing technology and how sometimes it's hard to keep up with the changing technology with the laws. So we have a kind of more generic recommendation that whatever approach Tennessee takes going forward to keep its road funding sufficient, that it be formatted in a way that is equitable for drivers of all types of vehicles, be they gas or electric, or whatever future source there may be.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up on that. And I'm on Tasser, and I should know this, but I don't recall. On the electric vehicles fees, raising those fees to be comparable to what the gas vehicles would pay. And then a recommendation on a higher fee for the plug-ins. How proportionally the plug-in, I'm assuming that would be less than the electric, but can you talk about that proportionality?
I believe I can check and get the exact figure for you. I believe it's about 65% of the plug-in hybrid to electric vehicle. What we estimate that the proportion of that would be to the electric fee. The electric fee currently is $100, and we were recommending a range. Because there are a lot of assumptions to go into calculating what the amount should be to be comparable to the amount charged to drivers of traditional fuel vehicles. And depending on which assumptions you make on fuel economy, types of vehicles, et cetera, that range is about a $50 range in possible fee increases.
But there would be a proportional amount for the
Yes.
plug-in versus the electric.
And if I could give a quick pitch, that report is now on our website as well. So all that information is publicly available at this time.
Right. Thank you. Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood, Dr. Lippert and team. Thank you for being here today. One thing on the electric vehicles, so one of the challenges is that a fee, say $300 a year for electric vehicles, one person will drive that car 10,000 miles, the other one drive it 50,000. So I know y'all will figure that out, how to make that equitable for our citizens. My question has to do, and you already mentioned it briefly, the annual infrastructure needs inventory report. And according to the report, the state has $62 billion of infrastructure improvement needs, transportation, higher education, and school renovations. And over the past 25 years that y'all have been doing this report, what are some of the key takeaways from from what TASER has seen over the years as far as the state needs are concerned?
I would say one of the key takeaways is that transportation is almost always the leader. And then other big categories include water, wastewater. And it kind of tracks whatever changes there are in federal regulations on those types of infrastructure projects. So that's one of the big takeaways. We have seen a big increase in education expansion needs over the years, but that tends to be regional. It varies from county to county. And then one of the big takeaways is there are always more in needs than there is in available funding. And we do report the proportion of needs that are currently funded in the report, but part of that is a result of the grant process. Just because there's a need reported in the study that's not currently funded, it may just be that they haven't sought funding for it yet. It's early on in the development stage. So I want to make sure people don't misunderstand that description.
Chairman Whitson.
Yes, Chairman, Chair Lady. Are there specific areas of the state which have a higher infrastructure improvement need over others in y'all's studies?
So as I don't think it'll be a surprise that high growth areas tend to have higher growth needs, higher infrastructure needs. But another thing we try to remind people of, just because an area may not have high growth doesn't mean it doesn't have infrastructure needs, that it also has a challenge funding. And that's one of the reasons why in the report we not only provide information on the dollar amount of needs, but also per capita dollar amounts. Because if you're in a smaller, more rural location, that doesn't mean your infrastructure needs are any less important. And it's possible that you need those improvements in order to draw the growth, in order for economic development and those types of initiatives.
Yes, ma'am. And again, I agree with you. Like you take, for instance, our rural interstates. They were built in the early 70s, late 60s, and there's still 2 lanes in each direction in the rural areas. Also, has the development of broadband increased statewide since the previous infrastructure report?
Yes, and this was also the topic in addition to this being a category that we cover in the infrastructure report now. This was something that we've done a series of reports on over the last several years on, and continue to monitor on broadband access and adoption. I think you may have heard the FCC has come out with their broadband map. There are a lot of concerns across the states on the accuracy of those maps. So it's something that fortunately the state of Tennessee is developing their own broadband map. So I think we'll have a better idea of what the underserved areas are. But the short answer is yes, we continue to see increased broadband needs.
Chairman Whitson.
One last question, Chair Lady. So you mentioned the broadband, the things that we're doing in that. Are other areas you see that we are gaining ground on our infrastructure improvements across the state?
Well, I would say most certainly on transportation, it's been an area of emphasis both in this administration and the past administration. So I would say that there, especially on bridges and those types of projects, I think we're gaining ground. It's just that, we are a economically very successful state, and with that success comes more growth, and with more growth comes more infrastructure needs. So it's kind of, we create our own never-ending pile of needs that way.
Thank you, ma'am. That concludes my questions.
Chairman Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And thank you for promoting me to chairman. I appreciate that. thank you all for being here this afternoon, and I appreciate the succinct and thorough opening. And so you may have covered this already, but if you would, just go over how many reports and which ones you anticipate completing this year.
So we will, this year, we will complete 4 reports next week, hopefully conclude 4 reports next week. And then over the remainder of the year, we have 4 existing studies that we will be completing. We anticipate any given legislative cycle, we'll get anywhere between 3 and 6 additional new studies. Of those, probably 2/3 of those will have a due date of next session. So you could anticipate we'll probably complete, counting the 4 that next week, we'll probably complete about between 10 and 14 reports this year.
And can you just glance over which ones those are that you anticipate completing?
Yes. So the immediate ones next week are our infrastructure, our update on our infrastructure inventory, our TVA pilot study, which is also an annual report, a comprehensive litter study, and then a study on reference-based pricing in healthcare. And then in July, we have a study on passenger rail and other transportation options, intercity transportation options, a study on solar utilities, a study on college campus emergency communication systems, and a study on liquor by the drink regulation in Tennessee.
Thank you.
You just mentioned, I think for the second time, you've mentioned the study on rail transportation that is, I believe you're scheduled, you said, to complete in July.
Yes, Charlie.
But I think that there is an application process at the federal level that the deadline is prior to that.
Mhm.
So, and the last information I saw, we were planning as a state to wait until we had your study in order to apply, but that application process might not be opened again for several months. So I guess my question is there an opportunity to have any kind of preliminary study that would provide us enough information to complete an application if we chose to do that? Or do we really need to wait until July in order to have enough information to complete that process?
Charlie, there's some confusion as to what is required in this application process, because what was originally, my original understanding was the state had to produce a letter of intent that they were interested in studying certain routes, and nothing more than that, not a large formal application process. And our Department of Transportation has provided a letter of intent to the federal administration, saying that Tennessee is indeed interested in passenger rail, but we haven't determined which routes we're most interested in. We have a short list of routes. It's the same short list of routes that people have been talking about in Tennessee for some time. So I mean, if Tennessee wanted to, they could submit something saying these are the routes we expect we're going to study. They're the routes that we are studying in our report. Which ones of those we are going to recommend to prioritize, I don't know yet. We're continuing to gather that information. We're going to be hearing from a panel at our meeting next week, and we might have somewhat of a better idea on that. But so the short answer is we could identify the routes fairly quickly, the routes that we expect to be interested in, but that's not the same thing as saying these are the routes that we are going to study in more detail because we think they're the more viable routes.
I just, again, I'm a little bit concerned about missing an opportunity or getting moved down in the Fed's priority list if we don't respond in the first round. So just something I think that my colleagues and I should be giving some consideration to. Next on my list, Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I think it's important that I confess that I was today years old when I learned that it's Lippard and not Lepard. And secondly, I just wanted to say, we got 5 members of TASER that sit on this body. So I think you came to the right place. And lastly, thank you for the work that you do. I'm a big fan of TASER. I serve on the body too, but I'm a big fan of the work that you all do, because it's the most thorough research that I've seen up here, and I truly appreciate what you guys do. Thank you.
Yeah, I was always happy when I come to this committee because our entire House delegation is also on this committee. So it almost feels like a TASER meeting in some regards. I will answer to anything a legislator wishes to call me. Hopefully it's something nice. And my other rule is when in doubt, just call them chairman because chances are they are.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you all for presenting to us. Question on the, you talked about the E911 services on college campuses. Is that public and private or just our public institution?
It's a study of the public colleges.
Representative McKenzie.
Okay, and then my second, I guess, statements, last question, and as we always talk about how friendly of a state we are in terms of people driving through from a transportation standpoint, we're able to capitalize on a lot of those tax dollars going into their tanks as they fill up here in the state of Tennessee. The model that I see doesn't really capture those transients that are coming through, and that they're paying that same tax that we are. This seems to be putting all of the burden. I'm talking about our e-vehicles, all of the burdens on the citizens. Well, we have a lot of these e-vehicles driving through. Has there been any serious thought to adding some type of surcharge on the charging that they'll do at the Cracker Barrel or wherever? I know they have to put their own card in there. Is there a way for us to capture some of that potential revenue?
Are you saying on transient?
On someone from New York driving to Atlanta and they have to charge when they get to Knoxville, when they charge up for that 45 minutes for whatever that margin is, there's a tax on it. There's a margin that we put on it that goes to their Blink card or whatever that they have now.
So there is a lot of analysis going on right now on how to charge, to put a charge on the charging stations, and that's something that they're still working through the technology on. We do discuss that in our report. I don't think there's a agreed upon approach yet on how to do that, or necessarily the technology to do it effectively yet, but it's coming. But as far as if what you're suggesting is a different charge or a higher charge on out-of-state vehicles, I suspect that there would be, you're not good.
No, I'm
suspect
talking
there'd be
about
some problems.
anyone that
Anyone.
puts their
Very good.
charger on our statewide, and we know we're spending significant monies, both federal and state, to build out this infrastructure for our e-vehicles, which is great.
Yeah.
It'd just be another opportunity to gain some resources.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and thank you all for being here. This is more of an observation than a question, but I was on your website, and normally I don't get a chance to really go to the department's website until I'm in here. And it's just so much information, good information. On this particular one, it has current inventory highlights under infrastructure. And it's got transportation utility, 34 billion, education, 15 billion, health, safety, welfare, 8 billion, recreation, culture, 2 billion, general government, 1 billion. But under economic development, it's 277 million. And I was trying to understand exactly what that meant. Is this an investment between 2020 and June 2025, a total of 61 billion? So what does the 277 million represent, economic development?
So those are going to be projects that don't fall into one of the other categories that are geared specifically more for economic development, things like maybe convention centers and things like that. Though, I mean, arguably a lot of the other investments, infrastructure investments, are to support economic development, but they're more traditionally captured in a transportation or one of the other categories.
Okay. Madam Chair, just quick question. For an example, Blue Oval, the billions of dollars that we've invested in that, would that come under the economic development between 20 and June 2025?
So the Blue Oval investments are going to probably fall under just about every category.
Okay.
There will be pieces, and we can pull that out and look at it project by project, county by county, and get more specific information. Now, the thing is, one thing to keep in mind is this is a forward-looking inventory. We're actually asking our partners at the state's development districts when they're surveying local government officials and when we're surveying the state, we're actually looking out 25 years, but we're only reporting out projects over the next 5 years. So, and there's always a 1-year lag. The report that we're about to produce, we're actually, our newest update will be out, will conclude next week and be published shortly after that. And it is looking from last year and really over a 5-year period, so about 4 years into the future.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And following up on what I think was Representative McKenzie was mentioning earlier, just to clarify on that, I want to ask this directly. Is there any tax right now that is charged on kilowatts per hour when someone is utilizing a public or private charger that is outside of their home?
And this is something that we spent some time trying to track. I think the answer is no, but I will confirm that.
I think it is as well, but if you find somehow or another that there's a federal tax that we're unaware of, but I think that is a conversation we should probably have as a state as to whether or not a kilowatts per hour should be charged for folks that are passing through or that live here when dealing with public chargers that are outside of, again, someone's home. So whether it's a private business or especially a charger that's been provided at the taxpayer's expense, either federal or state. And obviously free chargers would not be included within that if you're not collecting any money. But I do think it's a healthy conversation that we should have. But I didn't think and wanted to follow up and just make sure that there was a kilowatts per hour charge currently. Thank you.
And Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Leader Lambert, I had an opportunity to go to a workshop that the speaker asked me to go to, and there is not any taxes right now on your question. But I did want to just ask, thank you all for being here. Have y'all done any studying on, and I don't know what you'd call it, but there are people who have invented these gadgets now, like generators that make some charge as they run, and you don't have to plug it up. Have y'all done any studies on that yet?
We have not.
But there,
That-
that's, I know that's going to be big, and we've had 2 or 3 people to contact us and talk about these inventions, and it just, I guess what it would mean is the dealership could say, I can sell you this car, you charge it, or I can sell it to you and it charges itself.
So it's sort of a perpetual motion.
Okay,
kind of.
thank you.
Very good. You've piqued my interest, Representative Shaw. I'll have to look into that.
We're always glad to pique the interest of the folks at TASER. But again, thank you all for being here today. I know that the General Assembly every year gives you some challenging issues to study, and you all rise to the occasion, provide good information that hopefully will allow us to make good decisions for Tennesseans. So we appreciate the work that you do. Thank you
Shelley.
again.
Thank you.
Next on our presentation list is the Tennessee Historical Commission. We'll ask them to come forward. Mr. McIntyre and his team.
Good afternoon, Chair Hazelwood, members of the committee. It's good to be here. I'm Patrick McIntyre, and I'm State Historic Preservation Officer and Director of the Tennessee Historical Commission. On my left is Nina Skull, Tennessee Wars Commission Program Director, and on my right is Dan Brown. He's the Historic Sites Program Director. Also got in the audience today our Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Holly Barnett, and Katie Dirksen, who is our Outreach and Heritage Act Coordinator. Our Chair, Dorita Coleman-Williams of Memphis, can't be with us this afternoon, but she asked to extend her regards. So, established in 1919, the Tennessee Historical Commission consists of both state and federally mandated programs. As Tennessee's State Historic Preservation Office, we provide grants, technical assistance, and help our citizens conserve and enhance our state's unique heritage. We support local economic development through contributing to tourism, enhancements, and community revitalization through promoting downtown and neighborhood protections. We work with developers to help invest in 1.5 billion in over 1,000 Tennessee buildings across our state. And we have nearly 45,000 historic resources now listed in the National Register of Historic Places, which is administered in conjunction with the National Park Service. Today, there's 50 Tennessee communities enrolled with our office in the Certified Local Government Program, which entitles them to increased grant funding opportunities and technical assistance from our office for those communities that are enrolled in it and have local historic zoning protections. We also review approximately 3,000 projects a year that are federally funded, licensed, or permitted for their impacts on historic and archaeological resources. We have a Federal Historic Preservation Fund grant program that's one of our most visible and successful ones. It's provided some $29 million now since its inception in their matching grants to properties across the state. Our most recent ones included $900,000 in funding total, includes $20,000 to help restore the T.S. Stribling House in Clifton, and $22,000 to continue restoration work at the 1906 Christ Church Episcopal in Chattanooga. We also provide funding for 8 preservation planners in 8 out of the 9 development districts in Tennessee. Our state programs, we administer 17 state historic sites under our jurisdiction, consisting of 110 buildings valued at over $75 million. These range from Alex Haley's boyhood home in Henning, Tennessee, where he learned the stories that later became roots, to John Severe's home, our first governor, in Marble Springs in Knoxville. We have a unique public and private partnership. Those of you who've been here a long time know that model that we utilize. These are operated, all our sites, with nonprofit organizations who provide a lot of fundraising expertise, day-to-day management, and save the taxpayers a lot of money, so they're heavily invested in the local operations. We have a site maintenance fund for these 110 buildings at $500,000 a year. We also have capital projects. And thank you to each of you for helping fund last year a second program position for the State Historic Sites program. We're in the process of hiring a second person for Dan, so he's got somebody else to run up between Elizabethton and Henning and look at 110 buildings. So we're very grateful for your support. Our most venerable and probably our most visible program is our Historic Markers program. We've got over 2,000 of those. Every county of the state has one, and most roads. So we hear from you all a lot, and thank you for keeping in touch with us about any marker issues that you have. And then our Wars Commission division has saved almost 8,000 acres of threatened historic battlefield properties in the 29-year history of that program. We awarded $641,000 in matching funds last year to acquire the Braddock and Burns tracks near Chattanooga, which were associated with the battles of Chattanooga and Battle of Waxahachie. And then you have your own grant program, as she can elaborate on, including $11,000 to fund an exhibit on James K. Polk and the Mexican War in Colombia. And then we also awarded $50,000 for the Road to Freedom project, which talks about the African-American experience during the Civil War era, and it's kind of like the Civil War Trails program, and we have a mobile app, signs, a brochure, et cetera. It's designed to expand, and currently I think it's around 24 counties. And just very quickly, I know it's to keep to just a few minutes, but our historic cemetery program, which you helped establish just a few years ago, continues to make amazing progress. Over 30,000 cemeteries are in our database now. The staff there is assisting with all sorts of issues that come up, including when there's boundary issues, access. You get calls and emails to your office too, or in some cases, he's helped keep development from destroying cemeteries by helping identify the boundaries and what's recorded and working with descendants. So he's also undertaken cemetery workshops and gone out and helped show people how to clean stones in the most professionally established ways. So governor's budget is not yet out, of course, but we did ask for $10,000 in funding this year to help increase publications grants. We, of course, have a partnership with Tennessee Historical Society to produce the quarterly that we established with them in, I think, 1942. So that's another very old and venerable program. And then we also help fund the East Tennessee Historical Society and West Tennessee Historical Society's publications. And then finally, our capital budget requests this year included, made 2 requests. We didn't for improvements. We did not have any maintenance requests, but we've asked for a new visitor center at Sabine Hill State Historic Site in Elizabethton, $2.7 million. We restored it really well, but we didn't put any bathrooms out there, so they've had to use very temporary facilities for 5 years. So this will be a really nice amenity for the site. And then a planning study we requested for $200,000 for Castellian Springs, where we have 4 of our sites in this nice area of Sumner County. So those are our 2 capital requests. And so that's kind of a quick run through. I'm glad to entertain any questions or comments, and thank you so much as always for your support. We really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I think the only complaint I have about the historical marker program is that I see them, but I never seem to have time to stop and actually read them. So I always intend to, but don't really get around to it as often as I mean to. But they are, when I do, particularly where they're on the streets of downtown or wherever where you don't have to pull over and risk your life.
Right.
They're always interesting information. So we thank you for keeping that up. I think Representative Barrett is first on my list.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I'm new this year, so if I ask some questions that are redundant or you've already answered, I apologize. But it's my understanding that during last year's budget hearing, you all indicated that you were working on an agreement with TDOT regarding funding of the historical markers. Could you tell us where that is, if that resolution's been made?
Yes, thank you, Representative. We entered into a memorandum of understanding with TDOT for them to continue doing what they've done since the program began. It's kind of interesting. This one goes back to the late 1940s, and there was just kind of a handshake agreement. And so in order to kind of make sure that both parties were satisfied with the arrangement, it got formalized. So it's amazing, something that predates everybody in this room. But we were able to sign an MOU with them last year, and we give them, a journal voucher appropriation every year for their services of taking up markers if they've been torn down or, by the side of the road, and taking them to their repair facilities. It's done through the regional garages and erecting new ones, and, the general kind of things that we don't have trucks and staffing to do and didn't have in our budget. So just getting them to kind of continue to do what they've always done, and I think it's working well so far. So that's, yes, that's.
And is there a funding agreement between that? Is there funding going back and forth between the departments?
Well, I mean, we give funding to them for about $25,000 a year to be able to perform those services. So.
And then one more question. What is the average cost to install a historical marker, and do they vary depending upon the type of marker or where you're having to locate it?
Well, they're up to about $2,200 to produce, and then TDOT's costs, I guess, are based on what it says the truck. I mean, since that's not my agency, I don't have the exact cost, but it's kind of a flat fee sort of thing that they've developed on their end. But there's some other attendant things as part of that MOU that were put in there that were needed. For instance, if it's, just off their right of way, and there's got to be permission of a property owner, because when you say, as we all realize, so many of them are on roadways because they were originally it was for the motoring public, and they're always supposed to be in a publicly accessible place to be read. So sometimes they're right off the right of way, and they may be on somebody's, just on, some other property. So there has to be a permission slip. There has to be utilities that are called and cleared and all that. So that's where other things intervene, and I think those were reasonable steps, just to make sure everybody's insulated on that. And, but yeah, as far as a per marker cost, I can get that information. Our assistant director who deals with markers is out today, unfortunately, on leave, so on medical leave.
If you'd get that to the chairman, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. The Historic Cemetery Advisory Committee back in 2020 reports that vandalism is a common problem in Tennessee's 30,000 cemeteries because of a lack of effective monitoring. The report also states that cases of vandalism rarely get reported because people have a sense that nothing will be done about it. Can you tell us what is the procedure for reporting cemetery vandalism?
It's my understanding, in conjunction with our staff member who does this, that it's up to local law enforcement to carry out any of those things. There was one in Lebanon, Tennessee, for instance, a couple of months ago, and he reached out and interacted to see, I think it was a DA and local law enforcement, how they were going to prosecute that, if they could do that. But, all the enforcement is within the local jurisdiction, and so it's reported. It's a case of on case-by-case basis to that. And our staff advises accordingly, just based on, what's supposed to be done. But that's a huge issue in our state. Representative Shaw, as you know, and particular because there are some ways that the law might need to be improved relative to markers themselves and protection specifically for markers, which are sometimes now carried out under like a general property damage law or something, but there needs to be some laws, if you read the report, that we could kind of look into that would strengthen the penalties for theft of markers, damaging markers, as opposed to desecration of the grave. You can make the case the grave has been desecrated by the marker being desecrated, but that actually pertains more to the physical human remains versus the markers themselves. So there's some room for improvement. That may be more than you asked for, but it's an issue we are grappling with and that our cemetery program is intensely aware of.
Representative Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 or 3 other questions, if I could just get permission to ask them. How often does the commission hear of the cases of vandalism at these historic sites, and what steps, if any, has the commission taken to reduce vandalism at cemeteries since the issue of the report is not always clear?
Well, again, yeah, the Tennessee Historical Commission has no authority over the cases or even having that element reported. It's and so again, the individual in the program helps direct people to local law enforcement. In some cases, he's gone and met with folks. I know he's had phone calls and things to encourage that those local entities then prosecute, but nothing in the legislation gave us the authority to kind of or manpower to even try to handle that ourselves, except when we get word of that and knowing the initial way in which that should be handled. It's more about recordation and then general counseling on everything from cleaning them to where are the boundaries, if a development occurs, if there's a cemetery is terminated, posting it on our website, making sure it goes through the legal process when they're moved and that kind of thing.
This may be just a little redundant, but let me just ask anyway. Does the commission know of any ways in which cemetery vandalism could be reduced?
I think it comes down to things like cameras, monitoring, having local entities, people, organizations that are willing to monitor. I mean, when you think about tens of thousands of cemeteries, some of them are in extremely rural areas. There's nobody around. They're in pastures. Some of them are urban. There's just such variability that it really comes down to awareness and depending on the situation, maybe they can get monitoring and security in some ways, passively or actively.
Well, I personally want to thank you for helping us out in Hardeman County, and I thank you for helping me in particularly. I do have one last question. If I'm in a historic district and I want to beautify my property, you're not giving me any grant money. I just want to beautify my property. And if I hire someone to look at it and tell me how it ought to be done professionally, do I have to get permission from your agency to do that?
Well, historic district can be kind of confusing because the National Register of Historic Places is one level of historic district that is honorary in nature. And I've referenced permitting and funding on the federal side earlier, which involves our looking at effects on that. But the short answer to that is if you're in a local historic district where the Design Review Commission is located and people have made that conscientious choice that they want to protect their properties and property values, then that's done at the local level. That's where it's vested. So if you're in a local historic district, you wouldn't go to me or our office. You would make application before the local historic district commission.
Thank you.
And just to follow up on the cemetery issue, you mentioned how many historical cemeteries in the state that you have on your list?
I know of over 30,000 that have now been documented in the database that Grand Prairie is working on of our staff, and it may have grown even more since then. So, but they're everywhere.
Is there public documentation? Could I go on? Is there a website that I could go on and see if I know the name of the cemetery, if I can see
I think
it's listed there?
In the process of going live. I know I've seen it in-house, so I don't know if anyone's here who could tell me if the layer is active as of today, but yes, it's intended to be online, and that Holly says yes behind me. So thank you for the eyes in the back of my head there.
Thank you. As you mentioned, there are a number of rural my family has a family rural cemetery in southeastern, southern middle Tennessee, and my grandson's actually become really involved with a group at his school with a historic Black cemetery, African American cemetery that's near their campus that they've been clearing on a semi-annual basis and cleaning the tombstones according to your directions and that
Nice.
sort of thing. But I assume it's on the list, but I think it would just for those of us who do have those kind of family connections would be neat to go for us to be able to see if it's not on there, and if it isn't, maybe whatever steps need to be taken to make sure that it at least is listed there and somebody knows about it. Next on my list, Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood, and good seeing you and your team, Patrick. I remember 9 years ago, I first met you and you're good folks, and you helped us remount our artillery there in Franklin and Williamson County. Cott County has not invaded us since we upgraded our artillery systems. But just real quick, can you tell me the top 3 most visited state historical sites?
Well, I can easily, thanks for the pop quiz, Representative Whitson. I can easily tell you the top most visited one is the Carter House State Historic Site. And then
You
after
played
that,
right
Rocky
into that.
yes, is that a, that's number 1, 2, and 3, but no. Rocky Mount State Historic Site in Piney Flats, Tennessee is up there. And then I think it's Rock Castle in Hendersonville. Thank you. Dan can answer this.
Oh, thank you. And I know y'all have played a big part in us in restoring the Carter Hill Battlefield Park. And it's much appreciated, not only by the folks in Franklin, Williamson County, but across Tennessee and the tourist dollars that they bring in.
Thank you.
But in keeping with that, can you give us a quick update on the 2 big projects y'all helped us with, Craig Font State Historical Site in Sumner County and the Carter House? I know we were in desperate need for a new visitor center to accommodate that most visited site. Can you give us an update on the construction of those projects?
Yes, and thank you again, because those are 2 big projects that you all funded, capital improvements there. The visitor center at the Carter House, I think, is going before, is it the Board of Zoning Appeals or one of the zoning entities of Franklin soon? Yeah, to finalize the site plan, because the short version is we've worked really hard to site that property so that it works and integrates into a National Historic Landmark battlefield, and it's kind of low impact. And it doesn't exactly conform with the regular zoning, which would want it on the street and aligned with but it works with the site. So that's the latest one on that. Craig Font, we're still moving forward. I mean, Dan, you can probably tell us where we are in the process on that
Of course,
design.
that project is fully funded. And the fact that it includes new construction, it had to go back before the SBC for further review. As I understand, that is being completed this month. And that's the only thing that's been holding it up from beginning the final planning, and of course, which leads into construction. But it is something I literally spoke to our stream representative yesterday about this. And so it's front and center on their what they're looking at to get accomplished here in January. It's proceeding as planned. I think some of the SBC, there might have been some confusion maybe in November or December with a scheduling issue or something with SBC, but it's proceeding as planned. Everything is properly scheduled with SBC, and we are anticipating later in this month or no later than February to begin the formal final planning process and then to bid and construction.
And when you finish the state historical marker for Chair Lady Hazelwood on Signal Mountain, make sure you have a good pull off so she can check that out. Hey, thank you
point.
guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Whitson.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Not now. We can't now? No, we can't. Turn it on.
Can you hear me now? Oh, now that's ready to rock here. Now, after all, thank you all very much for being here. And I would encourage anyone, since Rock Castle is in the middle of my district, to come visit. It's a great historic site. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And also appreciate you mentioning Castilian Springs. But I was curious, what's the capital project up there that you referred to earlier in Castilian Springs? While that's not in my district, that's certainly in Sumner County in my backyard. So I'm curious what that project's going to look like.
Well, thank you, Representative Guerin. If you remember, I said we've got 17 sites, 4 of them are in Castilian Springs alone. So it's a real treasure. Over 50 years ago, it was called the Cradle of Tennessee History in a newspaper article. And I've always thought about that whenever I go up there. You've got a Mississippian period, 1,000-year-old plus Native American site. The Castilian Springs Mounds is still very much intact, and the state saved years ago. We've got Hawthorne Hill State Historic Site, which is a 1805 brick federal house, Governor Bates' birthplace. National Historic Landmark, Wynwood, 1828. Probably the largest log home, no, it is now, but maybe the largest log building ever built in Tennessee. And then Cragfont State Historic Site, it's hardly the least, 1799 to 1802, beautiful stone home of General Winchester. So we need to look at a comprehensive plan that kind of holistically addresses that. And so this is for a planning study. That's what the $200,000 request is for, so that we can kind of continue to synergize, let these sites work together. You know, a couple of years ago, it used to be that there were 2 different managing entities for the sites in that area. And through our efforts and their good auspices, they've merged together. Now there's one site administering all the state properties. And it's just a way of looking at the best uses and kind of long-term planning for connectivity, trails, everything associated with that. So that's what the request is for up there with the largest cluster of sites that we have together, and just phenomenal.
Well, that's great. Well, that's great. Well, thank you. I not only appreciate the investments y'all made in Sumner County, I sure appreciate the investment you made across the state for our historical sites. That's
thank you.
Wonderful. I got just one question. I noticed in some of your financial paperwork, the Civil War Site Preservation Fund and the Historical Property Land Acquisition Fund grew kind of exponentially. There's quite a bit of funds there from where they were. And the first one, the civil site, looks like it went from 7.3 million last year to 14 million this year. And the
Yes.
Historic Property Land Acquisition Fund went from 4 million to 9.5 million. So I was just kind of curious, what do you plan on doing with those funds?
Well, and thank you. That's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up, because the funding is based on real estate transfer taxes. And as you know, people are moving to Tennessee, and it's been kind of an unanticipated boost to our efforts. The Civil War Sites Preservation Fund has been around for about 10 years now. And it's, I know we've given over 5-6 million in funds. It's, they've got to be qualified properties with willing sellers associated with the 38 National Park Service identified top battlefields in Tennessee. And so we have, I think there's about 2 million in encumbrances. This is where Nina comes in, who can tell me what the encumbrances are in addition to that. But, you know, it's based on projects that are in the hopper, and we recognize that one as one where we should be able to continue to spend money. There's a lot of energy and excitement about the program. The American Battlefield Trust is a key partner on that. The other property, you mentioned, the Historic Property Land Acquisition Fund, is one that's grown really intensely. If you look at it, just 3 years ago, it was at 2.2 million. Now it's at 9.5. The legislation allows us to do several things, including buying property ourselves, or putting some into capital projects, although we haven't been successful the time or two that we've tried to do that. But the last part of it is the best part, that says that we can make grants to properties that are either state or not state-owned. And so we're in the process, now that we've got another position, of trying to work on a grant program for that fund that's going to be kind of similar in scope in the way it works to the federal funding program, make it easy. But Dan Brown, it's going to be administered through our sites program, and we'll be able to, you know, get applications for funding. It's going to be a tremendous boost to funding for preservation in the state. And so you should look for that to go online soon. I'll have a lot better news on that next year, but it's just amazing. It grew from what you would call a comfortable nest egg to something that really, you know, I can't tell you, you got to either spend it or, you know, we'll be in trouble, because we got to find ways to get this money out to the community. But I expect that that's going to be a very successful program. It's going to help a lot of communities in our state.
Thank you very much. Thank you much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to thank you all for everything you do. And I want to join Representative Garrett in saying thank you for investing heavily in all of our state historic sites, but so many of those in Sumner County, they're not in my district, they're not in Representative Garrett's district, but I mean, they're not making any more of these. I mean, you're never going to find another house somewhere out there that we didn't know about that's from the 1700s. I mean, some of these homes, I mean, especially Rock Castle, existed before the state was founded. And so I'm just so proud, and really all of us, for preserving these sites. Sabine Hill, I mean, early 1800s, I mean, all of these. And if we don't do anything else, I hope we definitely support our state historic sites, because it would be a tragedy for these sites to just disappear. Please keep us in the loop, and me specifically, if you don't mind, on how those grant funds, when they go live, so that we can get some information out there. And I hope that those will go to some of the sites that are locally owned by some of our cities and counties. I know they have some historic sites that are out there that are not state-owned, but that are still extremely important. I mean, many of them obviously are not quite as old as some of our state properties, but they're still an enormous part of our history. And so just please keep me in the loop and keep us in the loop on how that grant, when it goes live and how that's going to be allocated, because it's an opportunity to continue to preserve our history. If you haven't been to some of these sites, the ones in Sumner County he's mentioned, some of them are 20 to 30 minutes away. I mean, it is, you can go see a home in Rock Castle right on the lake that predates the lake by 170, 80 years. People go there and they look at that beautiful home and they think, wow, what a beautiful spot to build a home. The lake wasn't there when the home was built. And so it's just phenomenal to see these sites. So just wanted to say thank y'all, and please continue to let us know how we can continue to work down that list. Y'all have had that list out there for a long time. In the last couple of years, we've done a lot, and I hope we do a lot more this year. So thank you.
And thank you, Leader Lambert. We appreciate your support, the support of the General Assembly and the governor, and just giving, we've called it a golden age for our state historic sites. And it's just a really nice time to form of economic development, because these sites, if we treat them well, they'll be around forever, and so this is something that we feel is a great investment and a generational gift that we can give to our sites. So thank you.
Well, all of those accolades, I don't know that I could add to, other than to say, again, thank you for being here and sharing with us all the good work that is happening there. Now, I was at the little celebration that we did for the purchase of the property, Browns Ferry in Chattanooga. There's just a wealth of battle sites that are still out there that if we aren't careful, they're going to be built on or otherwise lost to future generations. So we appreciate your diligence in finding those willing sellers.
Thank you.
To enable us to grow that. So thank you again. And we look forward to hearing from you next year about all the great properties that you purchased with your growing wealth in those two funds. So
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we're always available, and we love talking with y'all and appreciate the good work that you do. So please keep us in mind as a resource. Thank you.
thank you. We're going to ask Ms. Pope and her team to move forward with the Arts Commission. They're next on our agenda. I know you all have been patiently waiting back there for a while, so we thank you for being early and being prepared. And without further ado, Ms. Pope will ask you to introduce those that you've brought with you today and then go straight into your presentation.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Ann Pope, and I'm Executive Director of the Tennessee Arts Commission. To my right is Stephanie Connor, who is Chair of the Commission. And to my left is Ann Brown, and she is our Associate Director of Grants. And so thank you for letting us have the opportunity to be here today. The mission of the Arts Commission is to cultivate the arts for the benefit of all Tennesseans and their communities. Our funding request for FY24 is $40,624,000, which includes our regular agency budget of $15.6 million and $25 million from American Rescue Plan Act funds. The Commission has submitted 2 cost increases for FY24. These requests do not affect the general fund revenues. The first request is to raise the estimate of specialty license plate dedicated appropriations by $3.8 million. which is reflective of a pattern of actual revenue growth over the last several years. The request also includes a one-time use of $2 million in reserves for statutorily directed purposes and will help address increased demand for our grant support to Tennessee communities, including in rural communities. The second request is a no-cost, non-reoccurring budget authority increase of $250,000 for the Tennessee Person-Centered Music Program, which is a $1 million multi-year grant from the Tennessee Health Facilities Commission. This extension will provide contingency spending authority for the remainder of the grant. The Tennessee Nonprofit Arts and Culture Recovery Fund was approved in November of 2021 for $80 million in ARPA funds for 3 years for grants to address severe COVID-related economic harm to Tennessee nonprofit arts and culture organizations across the state. Prior to the pandemic, the nonprofit arts and culture sector was a $1.2 billion industry, supporting nearly 40,000 jobs and attracting over 18 million attendees to events annually. The sector in Tennessee was hit hard. Over 97% of arts nonprofits canceled events. First round grant applicants documented $179 million in pandemic-related revenue loss. Following an intensive expedited process, the agency obligated $72 million to 154 organizations based on pandemic-related revenue loss. The agency dispersed 98% or $29.4 million in first-year funds in FY22. $300,000 has been awarded to Horn LLP for grantee monitoring. Applications for the remaining funds are due February 3rd and will be distributed in FY24 to eligible Tennessee arts and culture nonprofits based on a standard calculation of pandemic-related revenue loss. In addition to the ARPA funds distributed in FY22, the Arts Commission distributed $9.3 million through our regular grant programs to every county of the state through an open, fair, and competitive grant process. Altogether, the Commission made over 1,000 grants to over 680 different grantees in all 95 counties. A strong system of results reporting and grants monitoring assures public accountability. Demand for our grants continue to be high. We have provided the list of 2022 grantees by county. This information speaks to the breadth and scope of the work of the agency. The Commission has invested in nonprofits, local governments, and schools all across the state. The Commission invests in arts and culture infrastructure in Tennessee to improve quality of life, economic vitality, lifelong learning, and tourism, including in rural communities. On the slides, you'll see examples of nonprofits that attract audiences to and provide other services to communities. I'd like to highlight a couple of programs. The Commission's creative placemaking work, including the new Rural Arts Facility Fund, continues to be a focus of our agency. Creative placemaking enhances the distinct local character of Tennessee's towns and cities for positive economic outcomes. The new Rural Arts Facilities Fund helps rural communities build, renovate, and expand cultural facilities. In its first year, demand was very high, and grants were made in 10 rural communities, including McNairy and McMinn. Our Tennessee Person-Centered Music Program, which I mentioned earlier, is a $1 million multi-year grant originally from the Department of Health and now the Tennessee Health Facilities Commission. It aims to improve quality of life and care for nursing home residents through the use of individualized music for nursing home residents, including those suffering with dementia and Alzheimer's. Preliminary evaluation data indicates the program shows decreased medication usage, and reductions in adverse behaviors, and improved mood and quality of life for participating nursing home residents. The program is good for nursing homes because it provides additional tools and resources to staff and to families. The Tennessee Person-Centered Music Program is a national demonstration program that is documenting positive outcomes for using personalized music to achieve nursing home resident health goals. In November 22, the program received an Aging Innovation Award from the Tennessee Federation for the Aging. It's not too late if you have nursing homes in your district who would like to sign up for this program. So please let us know, and we'd love to reach out to those nursing homes. And I'd like to just thank you on behalf of the Tennessee Arts Commission. Thank you for the support of this body in providing funding and support that allows the commission to serve the citizens of Tennessee and strengthen Tennessee communities through the arts. I would welcome any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pope. Again, there's been a lot of discussion just recently regarding a number of the issues that you've talked about, and the music program in nursing homes is something that I'm hearing a good buzz about. So it's good to see that there's data, not just anecdotal evidence, but data that shows that it really does make a positive impact for. So thanks for that and all the other things that you're doing. We have a list of questioners beginning with Chairman Boyd. I couldn't find you.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and y'all, it's great to hear from you today. And I had just a follow-up question on the music center, or the person-centered music program. I know a large block of time that during that period from 2019 till looks like it runs out this year was during COVID-19. Did y'all do that remotely, or how were y'all able to do that during that time?
We had to, the program originally was designed to be in person, working in, volunteers would go into the nursing home to help with selecting individualized music for that particular resident. We had to recalibrate when the pandemic hit and create a virtual program. It did slow us down a bit, but it is working very well, and we're seeing great results.
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Are you guys still remote, or you're in person now?
We are still remote. We have done, we'll do some, but it's been, there's still some access issues. So we are doing most of it remote. It's allowed us to get volunteers from all over to work with iPads and things like that, to do the individualized music sessions remotely. So I would say almost all of it is remote.
Chairman Boyd.
Is the remote nature, is that at y'all's, did y'all decide to do that, or is that the nursing home that's asked you to do it?
When the nursing homes in essence shut down because of COVID, the nursing homes were saying we need, with the isolation with residents, we need this program. So we did come up with a method, which a virtual method, which given the nature, it was more expedient to stay with that model and stay virtual. And we've been able to serve more residents. We feel that way as well.
Chairman Boyd.
Last question. What I'm looking at, it looks like the funding runs out this year. What are your plans for the future with this program?
We are looking at a sustainability model. We are talking to another organization who is interested in perhaps taking this program on. They would apply for another civil monetary penalty fund grant. So we're in discussions with them, but nothing that has been solidified right now. But we are working to try to sustain this program. In the meantime, those participating nursing homes, they have the equipment. They have staff that is trained. They have handbooks that they can continue with new residents in those nursing homes.
And I just like to comment on the virtual aspects. Sometimes what looks like a a problem really becomes an opportunity. And I think that happened in this case because, as you said, I believe we were able to reach more people virtually than we would have been able to do in person. And it allowed you to have volunteers that might be available in Memphis to work with somebody in Chattanooga if you didn't have enough volunteers in that location. So I think that actually turned into a smart way to get the program out there. And as you said, as nursing homes have it established in their facilities, again, based on just the anecdotal evidence I've heard, I think they're going to be very interested in maintaining the program just because they see the positive results. So next on the list, Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Thank y'all for coming today. Last year, I think, last year I passed my first license plate bill. And so I noticed that license plates, that we've sold more license plates than we have in a while. I guess the question is, have you seen an increase in revenue over the last couple of years as it relates to license plate sales, as it relates to your budget, and what has that increase been like?
We have seen an increase actually, this is, I believe, our fourth year that we have seen an increase. They are trending up. Are you asking what is the basis of that increase? Why do we think that's happened? Or
no, the question is obviously as we sell more license plates, the revenue for both the state and the percentage for the Arts Commission goes up accordingly. I guess the question is, if we're selling more specialty license plates than we have in a while, is there anything new that you're planning on doing with this additional revenues that you haven't seen, that you plan on spending money for, or are you just trying to provide more resources at a greater rate than and using the increase that way?
Well, I think in both instances, to answer your question, I think we are seeing higher demand for our regular grant program than we ever have. We had over 13 million in request in counties all across the state. And we are seeing a more demand for arts and cultural activities for a variety of sectors and reasons. Additionally, we created last year, and this was the first year for our Rural Arts Facilities Fund. We have for many years had requests for communities they have arts and cultural assets in those communities, these cultural facilities that are often in downtowns. They're often in historic buildings that are in need of revamping and repairs and retrofitted for a changing audience demand for different arts programming. So we were able to offer that this time. We had $2 million of grant request, and we funded $600,000 for 10 grants over 10 counties.
Okay.
And so I expect we will continue that program given the high demand and popularity of that and need for that type of funding.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to that, first of all, let me say thank you for your investment and support of the arts in Putnam County. Really do appreciate that. I guess one of the things that I did find out that's recently about license plates that I did not know was that every special license, well, not every, but most specialty license plates, half of the revenues, net revenues after the general fund money go to the Arts Commission. So like when I buy a Tennessee Tech license plate, 20% goes to the road fund, and then of the 80% that's left, half goes to the Arts Commission and half goes to the original entity that the license plate is. I guess the twofold question, that probably was instilled long before the Arts Commission. I guess, are you aware of how and why that was the case? Why the specialty license plates, half the monies of the net revenues after the road fund, why they go to the Arts Commission instead of
The specialty fund, license plate funding program was originally developed over 40 years ago in the 1980s as a dedicated revenue stream for the art sector. When it was originally created, I've actually listened to the original discussion where
on
they,
8-track, I guess? Or,
yes.
yeah.
And they talk about this idea that nobody even knew if anybody would buy those plates. And the idea would be you have the sponsoring organization, and then you would have, they said, the arts ladies that would go out and promote and sell specialty plates
Right.
as a way to generate excitement for both the sponsoring nonprofit or college or university, as well as for the arts. And I think you've seen over the many years, that's exactly what's happened. You have, now granted, some of it might be from increased population in Tennessee, but also you have arts nonprofits that benefit all across the state are promoting the specialty license plate program to their audiences, to their boards, to their communities, and those funds go to those organizations to put on arts and cultural activities in schools, local governments, and nonprofits all across the state.
Yeah, but I think, and to your point, I think that's how it started is kind of interesting. Why we ended up being here is even more interesting, I guess, as the Arts Commission community knows better probably than most of us, even legislators up here, where the resources are coming from. It makes perfect sense for them to help facilitate or exhort people to buy especially license plates for that reason. I guess my only concern would be that, it may have been a great way to do it 40 years ago. I guess my point is that I'd like to see us fund you as a commission like we fund every other part of state government. If we believe in the arts, we should invest monies in the arts and make sure that we're supporting rural communities that way, and not necessarily in a differentiated way through the sales of license plates. So ultimately, we want to shore up what we're doing there, because there may be a day, and particularly whenever you have crises as it relates to financial crisis, you're the ones that are going to be most greatly impacted quickly, because people are going to say, wait, can I get a license plate for $20 or am I going to pay $65 for one? And a lot of people say, I'm not paying the $65. Next thing you know, the Arts Commission doesn't have any resources to invest in our community. And for that reason, I think we need to look long and hard about how we fund it. And maybe the way that we're currently doing it for the last 40 years is maybe not the best way. So thank you very much.
Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a quick question on funding that the commission has received for the economic hardships during the pandemic. I think there's about $80 million to help with various nonprofits throughout the state, and the commission helps expend that. So there's about $31 million left unexpended in that fund. So with applications for the remaining funds due by February 3rd, how many applications have we received to date?
Well, we expended in the first round 72 million, paid out over 3 years and the applications came in as because we received funding. Let's see, in the first year 30 million. The second year, which is FY24, is 25 million, and then the remaining amount in the third year. And so we have a little under 8 million left, and we have our applications are due February 3rd. We have had an extensive outreach across the state in a variety of different ways. And so we have well over 100 organizations that have expressed interest. Now we will see how many of those will apply. but we expect very high demand for the remaining funds.
Thank you. And just two quick follow-up. So it sounds from what you say there, it sounds like it will not be an issue expending those funds, I guess, by December 31st, 2024. I'll let you answer that. And then if you don't care to follow up with just, the state of nonprofit arts and and culture industry in the state in general. Has it rebounded? Does it need more help? Do you feel like we're on a positive trajectory there? So if you wouldn't care to answer those two questions, that's all I have.
I think because of, the arts and culture sector in Tennessee is a very strong sector. It's very strong, nationally, in the sector, generally speaking, prior to the pandemic. I think the pandemic hit Tennessee as it hit other states very hard. And it hit the sector very hard. The initial predictions of perhaps a third to a half of all arts nonprofits, particularly performing arts nonprofits, that might close down because of the pandemic has not happened in Tennessee. And so I think that has a lot to do with this funding. In the evaluations that we have seen from this first year is that this kept the doors open, helped pay the light bill, so to speak, and organizations were able to stay in business and provide arts and cultural programming. So I think it's made a huge difference.
And you think awarding the remaining funds by December of 2024, that won't be a problem?
I think we have huge demand, and we have a process in place that will facilitate that.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I believe that concludes our questions. Seeing no other hands waving in the air, we'll assume that to be the case. Ms. Pope, thank you. You have made this presentation a number of times to this committee. I think this is my 9th one to hear.
Wow.
And you guys do a great job. And as being a board member of some organizations in the past that were recipient of dollars from the Arts Commission, I know how important those dollars are to keeping doors open and keeping programs, particularly in some of our schools and places that aren't able to fund music teachers, art teachers, those sorts of things. And the programs that the commission helps bring to them really serves a need and fills a void for those organizations. So we thank you for continuing your good work, and thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the committee. Thank you.
Next up, we will be here from the Governor's Early Literacy Foundation. Literacy is something that we spend a great deal of time talking about in this General Assembly and prior ones. I'm sure this one won't be any different, but we've certainly put a lot of time and effort and conversation into that, and we were going to hear from the program. Mr. Pond, I believe, is going to be presenting, and if you can introduce those folks that you're bringing with you.
Madam Chair, and members of the committee, thank you so much for this opportunity. To your point, literacy is definitely a central discourse here in Tennessee. We look forward to sharing with you the impact Foundation has been able to have with the investment from the state of Tennessee. With me today, I've got my Vice President, Dean Hoskins, and our Finance Manager, Angela Greek. So they'll be here to answer any of the detailed questions I'm unable to answer for you. There's 6 foundational programs that we are offering here in the state of Tennessee to support our children and families in their literacy efforts. First and this next slide. Where is it? There we go. First and foremost is the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, which we have been providing in the state of Tennessee since 2004 and has been a statewide program for over 18 years. As of fiscal year 22, we have delivered 3.4 million books into the hands of children almost 300,000 children are recipients of this program. That represents about 70% of the state's eligible children from birth to 5 years old. So that's a book a month at no cost to families to encourage a joy of reading and to bring a culture of literacy into our Tennessee homes. Outside of the state's investment, we have been doing a caregiver engagement program through Ready for K, which is a text-to app to families. We're currently sending that out to over 200,000 caregivers representing about 250,000 children. What that is a very pragmatic, practical SMS text that they receive 3 times a week, providing them with a knowledge-based, skill base, and an activity that they can do in their homes without any special outside resources. This has been extremely well received. 94% of our families have said that this is a beneficial program and that they have enjoyed having this. We're currently providing this from pre-K all the way through our 5th grade students here in the state of Tennessee. We're also providing book buses. The last time we were with this committee, we had about 30 buses statewide. These are mobile libraries that are able to create access to literacy resources, as well as food and healthcare opportunities. We're currently funding 53 of these buses. That represents 38 counties across the state. Still trying to get one in Memphis. We're hoping this next year will be that far west, but one at a time. Storybook Trails has been another in terms of creating a culture of reading here in Tennessee. It's important to create outdoor reading opportunities. We began doing this with state parks and have had an enormous response from our community. Now we're seeing these in city parks, private parks, as well as private institutions, public libraries. Even Bristol Speedway is looking at putting a storybook trail on its premises so that we can be encouraging reading for our youngest citizens. An initiative that we shared with you this last year that has made a tremendous amount of progress has been our SELECT initiative, which is a statewide early literacy education collaborative here in Tennessee. We started out in 2021 meeting with about 14 principals from our early literacy efforts regionally across the state. This last year, we brought together almost 60 individuals representing about 30 different organizations across the state. Now we've got about 200 participants in this, representing about 80 organizations. And this is an opportunity to do some shared learning. Here in the state of Tennessee, we need early literacy to be rowing in the same direction together rather than individual siloed efforts. This is an effort to bring those communities together, create some shared learning, collaboration, and to get rowing in that same direction. And then the reason that we wanted to be with you here this morning, this afternoon, excuse me, is our K-3 home library initiative. Dean, do you want to share this? You want to take that?
Yeah, I can do this. Is this one on? Yeah. So back in 2021, the summer of
So
2021.
for those who are listening and watching at home, if you just identify yourself, please, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dean Hoskins, Vice President, Governor's Early Literacy Foundation. In the summer of 21, we piloted a K-3 home library summer delivery program. So taking the idea of the Imagination Library that we've done for 18 years and curating a group of 6 books for our rising first, second, and third graders, 3 fiction, 3 nonfiction, and additionally caregiver and student resources to go along with those books, mailed directly into their homes over the summer to address summer slide ostensibly, but to also provide additional resources for our teachers and librarians and caregivers, and continuing this idea that literacy is really everywhere. It's a daily activity. It's an integral part of life. So in summer of 21, we were able, with the legislators' help, to extend this to statewide first graders in public and charter schools. Summer of 22, we were able to expand and have rising first and second graders statewide. And then again, with legislative support, we will be able to extend this to third grade as well in the summer of 23. We will also next summer pilot the same program to rising kindergartners, about 15,000 from a group of mostly rural counties across the state, 32 counties across the state, and additionally Hamilton County as our urban area. Kindergartners are the hardest for us to identify home addresses in advance of enrollment into school. And so we will be delivering those during the fall break of fall 23 to that group, and then piloting exactly what the best way is to provide those same books and resources to them as we roll out that program statewide in the summer of 24. You want to do those, me?
So in addition to that, one of the things that we've done is partnered with a lot of our outside agencies, including the Department of Education, and 3 additional support projects we've taken on this last year. The first is to work with our 40 low-performing turnaround schools by providing them with some additional supports. We'll be looking at providing all 40 of those schools with additional library and student supports, including books and resources. We've been working with the department to smoothly deliver decodables to about 30,000 children across the state. These are early readers that really help in those first grades, kindergarten first and second, to help them learn that sounds first phonics approach to reading. And then we also worked with the department this last year to do some things in conjunction with summer school and providing a backpack program in which we provided some additional literacy resources to go into those backpacks, serving about 15 to 20,000 students.
Got it. So our funding request for fiscal year 24 comes in 2 parts, as it did last year. For fiscal year 24, the budget increase would be $2.75 million, which is for the Rising third grade K-3 summer home library program. That would be approximately $30 per child to provide them with 6 grade appropriate, high quality, curated titles, 3 fiction, 3 nonfiction, as I've stated before, along with copies of those same books and resources for every third grade teacher in the public schools and charter schools, and the library media specialists, so that they could be used all year long in the classroom as well. That would be a recurring request of funding, so that we would move forward with that on a statewide basis over the next several years. The $500,000 is non-recurring, and that would be for the kindergarten pilot, for those 15,000 students and teachers in the 35 pilot districts, for us to decide exactly what is the best way of rolling that out statewide the following summer. Additionally, we'll be submitting a supplemental fiscal year 23 request for that same $2.75 million for third grade. And that's a timing issue, as it was last year. Currently in fiscal year 23, we have received funding for Rising first and second grade for summer of 23, prior to the start of the new fiscal year. We would need the Rising third grade funding for summer of 23 prior to the end of the fiscal year. And then the fiscal year 24 would be for summer of 24, if that's clear.
So just in terms of the impact in the future, how we're seeing this for summer of 2023, we're going to be serving almost 240,000 students. As we look into the future of this coming summer, once we've got kindergarten through third grade, we'll be serving almost 300,000 Tennessee students with this program. And in terms of what we see beyond this, it's really looking at how do we further and enrich this so that we're looking at outcomes from this program, looking at what the return on investment over the several years that we're implementing this program look like. So we'll be looking at enhancing some of the research, working with research partners like MTSU, ETSU, to start measuring what outcomes and efficacy looks like around this program. So with that, I'd love to open this to the committee for any questions you might have.
Thank you. We have Chairman Crawford, I believe, is first on our list.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about the book bus program. You mentioned a few numbers there. I need to get clarification. I think you said there was 30 buses and
No, there's
50
over 50 buses are currently funded, representing 38 counties.
Okay, so 38 counties, and you said 53 buses?
Yeah, 51.
51, okay. All right. How many of
Well,
these school
53.
systems currently utilize this program you do when the bus comes around?
So what happens is a school district will contact us if they're interested in doing this. We help them provide that seed funding and operational expertise. So the school will actually run and operate that bus. So every 18 years, a school bus is decommissioned, and that gives an opportunity. It can't be used for taking students around. It can be used for secondary uses. So those school buses can be used as a mobile library. We're also seeing folks using everything from RVs to food trucks to 14-passenger vans that have been converted to create these mobile libraries.
Can you tell me how many you have as far as participating statewide in the program?
That would be the,
So there are 53 school districts who are running a bus. We started the program in 2014. And so we're now up to 53 school districts have buses, and we can get you a list of who and where they are. That just encompasses 38 counties.
Okay. Final question, Madam Chair Lady. What can we do as state legislature? What can we do to help participate and make this program more people use it and to make it better?
Yeah, first and obviously continue supporting the work that we're doing. Second, I think is being a voice for how critical literacy is in your districts. There's a number of events that we host throughout the year across the state. We would love to have assembly members come and participate in those events. I think it shows support for the work that's being done in early literacy here in Tennessee.
Yeah, and I would add, in any communications within your district, we can let every one of you know. We're currently serving 139 of the 143 school districts. And so in your communications within your district, that they should be receiving these books. And if they are not, then please have them contact us so that we can get them on board.
One more question, and it just popped up. How many of these buses are participating with the food programs? Does each bus do a food program when they come around, or?
Almost all of them do. Yeah. In fact, do you know of any that are functioning without it?
I think the only one I can think of off the top of my head, we have one bus that is completely dedicated to STEAM activities. And I don't know whether they actually participate with a local food bank or food program or DHS funded food program. Many of them use their Title I dollars over the summer to offer food services as well. But I would say 99% of them do.
Thank you.
Chairman Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question focuses on the partnership I understand that exists between the foundation and the Tennessee State Parks regarding children and their families and creating reading experiences for those people. Where are those programs currently available in Tennessee? And how popular is the Storybook Trail? And how does the foundation get the information out to Tennesseans about these opportunities? Thank you.
You want to take that?
Okay. We began working with the State Parks Conservancy when it was first started to, I think the very first park was at Long Hollow. Long Hollow? Yeah. Long Hunter State Park. And then we have, as each state park has had either the capacity to create a storybook trail or had a trail that was already set and could be converted into a storybook trail. We have expanded with them, and then additionally through public and private parks around the state that have been interested. Here again, we bring the book permissions and the structure, organizational structure and best practices, along with some vendor relationships on how to enact the program. Then state parks publicize it, our website publicizes it, our newsletters publicize it across the state, and then we would ask all of you to do that as well. And we can get you a list of exactly where they are. It's on our website, but we're happy to send it to your office.
Thank you for the information, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here, and I do thank you for what you do. And maybe this is just more of a comment, but I am puzzled as to why we don't have mandatory pre-K in every school across the state of Tennessee. And rather than people requesting the books be put in the system and the teachers teach it. I, I'm not an educator, but here's what I know. You teach a child to read early, not third grade, not second, but early. And what I don't understand is why we can't have a program where we have these books in every school in the state of Tennessee and make it mandatory for the kids, because that's how we're going to bring our kids up to par in reading. And I've spoke to folks in education. I got a problem why we don't do this, because I think we are just kind of wasting money to catch a kid at third grade. I know I'm not saying it's all wasted, but it's just kind of my soapbox. I just think we need to do this early. I don't know if y'all got any comments on that.
You will find no disagreement on this panel.
I will say that because our mission is to bring access to families at no cost to them to the best-in-class literacy resources, we have done additional things that were not in the slide deck. We have been able to provide literacy resources and books into 2,500 of the DHS childcare provider sites over the last 2 years and continue to do that. We've tried to make sure that every child in foster care is automatically enrolled in the Imagination Library, and then all of their offices also get resources so that we can try and meet people where they are, since there isn't necessarily the same type of care or instruction available from birth across the state.
I see no further questions. So again, literacy, we've spent a lot of time and effort and resources of the state and directed federal resources towards improving it. But you all play a key role because you get to these kids before they're ever enrolled anywhere from birth on. So I think the more we can target particularly areas, we know where our failing schools are. We know where the zip codes where we have these sorts of issues. So I think working through you all to get, and I know it's hard to capture a population that's a very transient population a lot sometimes too, but I think working with you all and doing what you do to make sure that those books get in the hands of the students. And I think we've done you all have done a really critical step forward, taken a huge step forward by now providing instructions to parents and caregivers about how to use the materials rather than just a book shows up in the mailbox and it may never get read to a child. Child obviously can't read it at a few months old. So anyway, we are very grateful for the impact that you're making on a huge problem that continues to plague Tennessee, and we look forward to making progress together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We are going to move from literacy to sports wagering. We might want to talk about financial literacy as we deal with this issue.
Money.
So we welcome Ms. Thomas, and we'll let her introduce her team and go straight into your presentation, if you don't mind.
Okay. There is an on-off button that clearly was escaping me. Mary Beth Thomas. I am the Executive Director of the Sports Wagering Advisory Council, and Stephanie Maxwell, our General Counsel, and Keith Boring, our Deputy Director. Thank you all so much for having us today. It is so nice to be back in the legislative session. It's wonderful to be here. So I know I'm supposed to keep this to 5 minutes, and I'm really going to try. I wanted to give a little bit of background about what we do because we are relatively new, and I know we have at least one new member and several new members of the committee. So Tennessee legalized sports wagering in 2019. And at that point, it was placed under the regulatory authority of the lottery. And after about a year, the lottery transitioned regulatory functions to the Sports Wagering Advisory Council, which previously was advisory in nature. Now it is a full regulatory state agency. We are hopeful that this year will remove advisory from the name because it is the regulatory body and it's not connected with the lottery anymore. So that became effective January 1st of 2022. Our council is our oversight, and we have 6 members appointed by the legislature and 3 by the governor. And I have their pictures up here in case any of them are from your hometowns. You can tell them you saw them on the big screen today. Stephanie Keith and I started right from the beginning, really prior to our regulatory function starting. And our first order of business was really to build a new office function, just all of our functions. We had to hire staff, develop processes and procedures, all of our infrastructure. We started from the ground up. The first few months were really spent catching up on some licensing of operators. So really, the first 3 or 4 months, we were focused on vetting applicants, making sure that we had all of the background checks performed, all of the technology reviewed, all of the extensive process that takes place with our licensure. So our main function in our office is to oversee the operations of these 13 now sports books that we have offering online sports wagering to Tennesseans. And we are required to make sure that they follow the Sports Gaming Act and the rules, and that they do so in a manner that really protects the public interest of Tennesseans. After the licensure process, we go into what I think is the hardest part of our job, which is the compliance, the day-to-day, making sure that each and every operator is operating a fair environment. So this year, our main focus has been on developing that compliance program from 3 different angles. So we have our technology team, and they are focused on communicating with these operators on a daily basis, looking at every aspect of their platforms and making sure they comply. They also have back office access to each platform, so they don't have to take the word of the operators that they're doing the right thing. They can go in and independently verify it. They have access to third-party systems that do several different types of cross-checks as well. We have spent a lot of time doing investigation and outreach also. We have a compliance and fraud investigator and an investigative analyst, and they look at things from whether an operator has the right geolocation programs in place, or whether they're complying with things that we know are important to you all, like preventing minor access and preventing issues like using credit cards, which is prohibited by our act. We also spent quite a bit of time developing outreach with state and local and federal law enforcement. So if there are issues we need to address, we have a network that we can address them with. And we were fortunate to partner with the NFL's Integrity Unit and the FBI's Sports Integrity Unit earlier this year to present a sports integrity seminar to all of the colleges and leagues in the state to help let them know about all the issues that might impact them on an integrity basis. Finally, accounting and audit. That really is the meat and potatoes of what we are doing on a day-to-day basis on one huge part of our team. We have in our staff several accountants and auditors who work with our operators on a daily basis to oversee wagering data and collect the 20% adjusted gross revenue privilege tax that's imposed on their operations. And it is a lot of money that is coming in to the state. So I've got this graphic that shows you 2021 to 2022. So in 21, $2.7 billion was wagered by Tennesseans and $40.6 million was collected in privilege tax revenue. In 2022, 3.8 billion wagered and 68 million collected in privilege tax. So if you all recall, that goes 80% to the fund that funds the Hope Scholarship and other educational scholarships, 15% to counties, and 5% to responsible gaming initiatives. Turning to how we operate, we don't touch the privilege taxes aside from regulating to make sure that they're collected properly. That does not go to our operating expenses. Our operating expenses are funded by licensure fees. So every operator pays $750,000 each year, and it's annual. They pay it every year, and that funds our operating expenses. At the time that we were formed, we had authority for a spending authority of $6 million based on 8 operators that were in existence. Well, there are 13 now, and so we're expected to collect $9.75 million, but of course, our spending authority is still 6, and that's perfectly fine. And in fact, we're operating at about 45% of our budget anyway. Anything that we don't use goes straight to the Tennessee Promise. So we don't keep it. It's not stockpiled. It goes to the Tennessee Promise. No general funds are used. And again, as I said, no privilege taxes are used. So just to give you the specifics of last year, if you look at January through June, when we were the regulatory body, our revenue that came in, and it's a little bit tricky to look at it because it comes in at different parts of the year because their renewal is at different parts of the year, the licensing is. Anyway, 3.6 million, we spent 1.4 million, and we transferred 2.2 million to the Tennessee Promise. That's, of course, in addition to the privilege tax. We don't have any changes or any requests for next year. We would like to have the same spending authority, and we do not need any additional positions. We asked for positions last year. If y'all remember when this bill passed, there was one position allocated to it, which I can tell y'all that would be a crazy person who could do that. And we have, as I said, we now have 12 staff members. And we're being really cautious about hiring to make sure that we don't overhire if there's any sort of consolidation in the industry, reduce our needs. So we do have some open positions, but we're just being very deliberate about that process. And with that, I think I kept it close to 5 minutes, and I'm glad to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, Director. Members, I do have a few folks on the list here that'd like to speak, and we'll begin with Representative Shaw. Representative Shaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. I've learned a lot about sports wagering because I didn't know anything at all about it. But I do remember back FY 22-23 supplementary budgets included the authorization and dedicated revenue for 19 additional positions with the advisory council. Have these positions, I heard you talk about 12, but have these positions been filled? And if not, which positions are still vacant, and does the council intend to fill the other vacant positions?
Yes, thank you for the question. So you're correct, 19 additional positions for a total of 20 overall were approved. We have a total of 12 right now, and the ones that are not filled are additional accounting and technology positions. And we may need to fill those positions depending on how things continue to progress. You know, it is truly an industry where the more that we understand and dig deep into the operations of the sports books, the more we know we need to really have a good check and balance on our side on what's going on. So we're just trying to make sure we make the right hires, not the fastest hires. So right now they're vacant, but I would think that we would make some additional hires this year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I assume then what you're saying, you would fill those positions based upon how many more sports wagers come on board. I heard you talk about you got how many now?
We have 13.
13. And so you can get by with the 12 you've got now. What would how many more would need to come on board for you to fill those more positions?
Well, it's really difficult to say. I don't know. It's not really an apples to apples type of staffing pattern. It's more the more issues that pop up that the operators are, perhaps they want to do something that's legal under our statute, but it's not something that we had really audited but needed to. We might need to dedicate more resources to a program that checks what they're doing. So it's really difficult to say because it is such a new industry across the country. I mean, this all just started in 2018. So the way they are developing their business model and their plans, we're just keeping up with it every day with something new.
Well, can you provide any brief overview of the makeup of the duties assigned to the council staff?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Let me pull out my list here. What? Apologies. Got lots of papers here. So, you're seeing three of them right here. I'm responsible for the overall programs and regulatory function of the agency. Keith Boring, our Deputy Director and Chief of Staff, is also responsible with me for helping to manage our HR functions and interface with other parts of state government. We are served by STS for our IT functions. And of course, we work with FNA and all, just like every other state agency. Just because we're small doesn't mean we have any less that we have to do with every part of state agency to comply. We're about to have a comptroller's audit and a CPO compliance audit. So there's a lot of just reporting and interaction we have to do. Stephanie is our general counsel, and she, of course, provides legal advice and also oversees the various things that fall under, rulemaking. And we are responsible for player complaints. She also approves promotions and things that sportsbooks want to offer to make sure that they're legal, and especially given Tennessee's constitutional makeup with prohibition of games of chance, there's a lot that she has to do with that. And looking at things like how the House rules and terms and conditions comply with all of our rules and regulations. These sports books have 100 pages of House rules and terms and conditions. And it is a day-to-day, she is constantly on the phone and emailing with various people, not to mention the licensure process that we have to go through annually with each one. We also have a deputy general counsel who assists her with those matters and is also sort of the front line for the initial player complaint review. We have a chief information officer, and he manages our self-exclusion functionality, which is something if you are a gambler that has an issue and you would like to exclude from a platform, he makes sure that if you exclude from one and you want to be excluded from them all, that is circulated to all of the operators. He also, along with our IT auditor, which is another position, they review all of the extensive internal controls that sportsbooks have in place to implement all of their tech functionality. They have this entire change management function and approval. They work with our outside, the outside sports betting platform assessment providers and security assessment providers to make sure that the third-party assessments are also in order and that they are triple checking everything that's happening. And generally answer all of the tech specific questions because these are huge tech companies. They all operate with a lot of interconnected, really complicated technology. And so we rely on them for understanding what's happening there. We have a controller who works along with a staff accountant to reconcile daily, weekly, and monthly privilege tax reports and to work with the Treasury to collect those into the correct LGIP account for distribution to those different categories I told you about. That's something that requires them to not only receive the money, but of course, make sure that it matches up with what we can see from the systems that are in place. We have a financial licensing and compliance auditor who is responsible for vetting as part of the application process, the financial information received from sports books, but also once they are licensed, doing a scheduled audit on their financial operations and compliance with all of their reporting. And she also audits our office to make sure that we are collecting the privilege tax accurately and that our controller and staff accountant are doing the right thing. Since it's so much money, we felt like that was important to have a lot of checks and balances. Our technology auditor, I mentioned him a little bit before, and one of the biggest components of his job, in addition to the change management and technological internal controls, is part of the vetting process for operators and vendors. He's responsible for extensive review of all of their technology platform stacks. Our compliance, integrity, and fraud investigator, I mentioned him earlier. He works on approving wagering markets, working with other states on compliance issues, background reviews. All of our applicants have to have all of their key personnel vetted, background checked. They do a multi-jurisdictional personal history disclosure form that's 100 pages of disclosure about everything they've done, basically the same that a casino would do. He oversees that process and works with the TBI and the FBI and any prosecutors on issues identifying fraud. Investigative analyst, he works with him to ensure that all of those things are done. It's really a two-person job. And then finally, we have a licensing coordinator who is the point of contact for each of the operators and vendors. We have 13 operators, but we have 27 vendors, and those are related entities that we also have to register. And she is responsible for making sure that we have what we need and that they understand what their disclosure and reporting requirements are. And she also helps us with, keeping everything organized and filed correctly. Those are our 12 positions now. Was that too much? Sorry.
All right, I believe Representative Garrett is next on our list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. This is an interesting new agency, so I appreciate the explanation beforehand to give us a good understanding of how it works. I noticed in some of the paperwork that you actually did have a fine, that a $13,000 fine that someone had to pay, and I was curious, what, and I'm sure this is the statute, and I was here when this legislation came through. I don't remember the actual fines, what they were. What can a company be fined for whatever they violate under the statute? And then my question would be, what relating to this one particular fine, what was it? And was it more than one vendor, or was it multiple, or kind of some details about that particular fine? So,
Good question. So we really have broad authority for fines. And under the statute, the maximum fine is 25,000. And I want to see what in particular you are looking at on the 13,000. Okay. So, and Keith is telling me that amount in particular is what was transferred from the lottery. Those were fines that they assessed. I believe, based on my recollection, and I hate to swear to it because I was not there at the time, I believe that a portion of it was because of gift cards. I can't speak to it. But we do have.
would gift cards equate to the credit cards, which is one way of not being able to pay when you use these services?
I'm sorry.
Would that be related because you can't use credit cards for purposes of purchasing
That's correct.
a wager? Okay.
Yes, that is correct. But yes, we can assess fines for any violation of the act. And I will tell you that this past year, we really focused on trying to understand all of the business operations and address issues in a sustainable way that was a long-term solution. And you know, we're not driven by fine revenue. Some states are. I mean, some states have their budgets set, you know, anticipating a lot of fines. And so it's been great that we've been able to really understand and develop a good working relationship with those that we regulate, so that when they see a problem, they report it and we're able to address it instead of them waiting for us to come, you know, always root it out. Now, there are things that we found that we've addressed with them, and because it's been, you know, issues that we've been able to correct in a timely, they've been able to correct in a timely manner, it didn't rise to the, you know, necessity of a fine.
And one, you stated earlier, I believe you have 13 operators that pay the $750,000 annual fee to be a sports book, but then you also stated about 23 or 27 vendors.
27 vendors.
And do you have the ability to, if the vendors have to comply also, I would assume with the statute, you have the ability to also find the vendors if they do something wrong under the statute as well? Or is it just 13 operators?
So currently, the way the statute reads, it does not provide specific authority with regard to the vendors. Now, there is a separate civil penalty authority for anyone who violates the act in any way, which I think that could apply to a person, a vendor, anyone. But we are also hopeful that we're going to have a cleanup bill this year that will actually write that in there.
Sounds like
So
that'd
we-
be a good idea.
Yes, we have that exact ability to fine,
Okay.
suspend, revoke, whatever.
Okay. Thank you very much for your responses. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Miller. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and Director Thomas, thank you and your team. Madam Chair Lady, I'm sitting here thinking Tennessee is finally in the gambling business. And I'm sure members would agree. We're definitely in the gambling business, and I've always supported Tennessee being in the gambling business ever since the state of Mississippi decided to do what they were doing, as well as Arkansas. And it reminds me of the millions of dollars that Tennesseans have lost going across the border, although we're talking about sports betting now. So I'll get to this question. I'm looking at the number right now. I think it's 13 vendors at $750,000 initially for a license fee. Are any of these vendors actually based in Tennessee?
Yes, sir. There are two based in Tennessee.
The next question, $750,000 fee. You know, that leaves a lot of, I guess, small businesses or individuals out of the business or the opportunities. Is that a fair statement?
I think I would respond that it's online sports betting platforms have so much technology and have such an extensive list of protections that they have to comply with. It is not something that an individual an individual would not be set up to have that full functionality. It takes a team. I mean, the small business, sure, but it takes a team of people to manage something like a sports book.
And at this time, we have 13. Is there a cap on the number of vendors that
No.
we would allow? And when I say we, I'm assuming the advisory council would allow. Is there a cap on that, or?
The General Assembly did not put a cap in the Sports Gaming Act.
Okay. Last question. You mentioned right now the name advisory, but you want to change that. That would take legislation to do that, to change that name.
Yes.
Is it anything else that you're looking at changing during this legislative session?
We have several things that we would like to truly clean up that are in the statute. And I would be glad to chat with you. I would my,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Garrett, you had another question?
Just one clarifying question. Isn't in the statute what the fee is? You all don't set the fee. The
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just Director Thomas, isn't there also like a 10% holding requirement as well that would go along with not only the $750,000 application fee, but then in order to, I guess, retain that license, they also have to have that 10% holding fee. Is that correct?
Currently in the rules, there is a requirement that the operators cap their payout at 90%. So yes, a 10% hold.
Okay. And there's no plan of that changing or anything like that, is there?
There is no plan of that changing.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Are there other questions? We recognize that you are a young agency, just getting up and running, but we also recognize the financial impact that you have had and will continue to have on the state. And we thank you for the oversight. I think I had to step out for a minute, so I missed part of the conversation. But I do know that we have to be very careful. I heard you mention, we have very sophisticated companies providing these services, and we have to make sure that we have the capability to understand how they operate, to make sure they're operating in a way that is, first of all, fair to Tennesseans, and secondly, gets us all of the revenue that the state is due. So thank you for making sure that the hires that you're making have the capability to do that and put us in a good position. So we appreciate you all being with us here today, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members of the committee.
And now we're going to be so excited for so many reasons to see the next presenter on our list. We're always delighted to see Director Hargrove, the president of the Lottery Corporation, and to hear from her. But when you're winding up our day, that makes you even more precious to us. I think I butchered both your title and your name, so please, I apologize. It's the end of a long day. But President Paul, please, let's hear from the lottery. And I know there's lots of conversation and some bills that I've heard about floating around already about maybe some modifications to the Hope Scholarship. So let us understand how much money there is there so we know what we can and can't modify.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. You are ahead of schedule, so my CFO is just now getting off the interstate. So the presentation you have in front of you, I don't have, but I can give you lots of highlights without that. Tomorrow is our 19th anniversary, and in those 19 years, we've raised $6.7 billion for the education programs that we fund. 1.9 million students have received either scholarships or grants, as well as had the opportunity to attend after-school programs.
Could we just stop there and get you to repeat those numbers? I think it's worthy of.
If I go slow, Andy might get here. No. Well, tomorrow is our 19th anniversary. And many of you in this room were part of the enabling legislation, which has been a huge part of our success. In those 19 years, we've raised $6.7 billion for the education programs that we fund, and 1.9 million students have received awards in the form of either scholarships or grants, or after-school programs. I don't know that any of us anticipated we'd have 2 million students who would have benefited in this short of a period of time. Thank you all. We have only two major issues that we think will prevent us from continuing the growth we've had. This current fiscal year, for the first 6 months, we're up 3.1% through close of business last Saturday night. So we see no reason why we can't meet our estimated return figures. The low figure we had was 472 million. The high was 483 million, with 18 more million going to after-school programs. So we're well within that target range for this current fiscal year. We have two issues that we face. One, as you just heard, there was $3.8 billion taken out of the economy with debit cards for sports wagering, and we have the ability not to use debit. So that's really, we believe, an issue for us. Our statute requires you use paper or coin currency, and we believe that that causes us issues long-term for our growth. The other one is gray machines that look like slot machines that are in convenience stores. They're particularly an issue in Memphis and along the Kentucky border, where they are coming from a company out of Missouri and infiltrating the convenience stores where we sell tickets right now. So they are illegal if they pay out, and we have Vic Donahoe, who's our VP of Security, working with local law enforcement to try and put a stop to that. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and Andy may have more specific figures if you want them. And so I'll just answer whatever you want to know. I'm here, whatever you want to know.
Thank you. We have a number of questioners, and we will start the process. First of all, again, I just want to underscore what amazing numbers those were that you just quoted to us, almost $2 billion. But I think that the critical thing is the number of Tennessee students, many of whom might not have had an opportunity for post-secondary education without the Hope Scholarship, which wouldn't have happened without the lottery. So we thank you for your good stewardship of that program. And Representative Garrett, you're first on my question list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You had mentioned this, I believe, in your opening remark about your growth. And typically the lottery has outpaced growth, which usually is 2% per year. And you've been roughly at 5.6. I think you mentioned for the first half of this year, you're right at 3.1%. And you, again, hinted on it that there's a challenge for people paying by coin, paper versus credit cards, et cetera, to increase that particular growth. What do you expect over the next year or years to come in the growth in your industry? There are challenges to make sure you can exceed that 2% growth and reach the 5.6 that you've averaged. What are some of the things that you're seeing as a challenge, and how are you going to overcome some of those challenges to make sure the lottery continues to grow like it has been?
Well, the growth for the first half of this fiscal year, and thank you for the question, but the growth for the first half of this fiscal year has come from very large jackpots from both Powerball and Mega Millions. And those two games combined make up less than 10% of our sales. 80% of our sales come from our instant tickets, and instant ticket sales are down over 4%. So long-term growth for us, we need to deal with the decline in the instant ticket sales, because you can't count on a $2 billion jackpot every year. Andy, come on and have a seat.
Rescue.
So you can't count on it. We had a $2 billion Powerball jackpot and a $1.3 billion Mega Millions jackpot, and those run in cycles. So we have to get a handle on what's going on with our instant ticket products in order to maintain that growth. And as I said, we believe a lot of it is due to $3.8 billion coming out of the economy with the ability to the only way you can play is with debit cards, and we don't have that ability. So
And you're,
we think
and
that's a
excuse me,
problem.
And you're referring to the sports books side of that because they can,
Yes.
because you're obviously using an app or whatnot. So you're using your credit cards. Does the lottery have an app? All your games, correct me if I'm wrong, are inside of a convenience store or someone that signs up for those lotteries. There's nothing for you to do electronically. Is that correct?
You cannot play electronically without the ability to use a debit card.
Right. Okay.
So the only place we can sell is in convenience stores because you have to use paper or coin. We're not convenience stores. We have convenience stores and grocery stores, and we have about 5,200 retailers nationwide or statewide, but it's all with paper or coin currency.
And I think you've touched on my final question is about the challenges in growth. Obviously, one of them is the ability to use your credit card. What other, if any, challenges do you see to make sure we can have the growth that we've expected over the past 19 years?
But as I said, the other issue is really the gray machines that, again, are right in the locations where we sell our product. And so they pay no taxes, nothing to good causes. They're just illegal slot machines in locations in Tennessee.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just to follow up, this is Paul, to his question on, are there other states that are involved in Mega Millions and the other jackpot?
Powerball.
Powerball, thank you. Do those states allow debit card sales?
I think out of the 48 U.S. jurisdictions, there are only 4 that do not allow debit or credit.
Okay, so
So there's, 42 that do.
we're an outlier in that. All right, thank you. Next on the list is Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Just want to say thank you for the great work you're doing. It's obviously Tennessee has a fantastic reputation as it relates to our lottery and how we operate it, and a lot of that has to do with you. And so I wanted to thank you for being here today. One of the things we discussed last year that I guess I'll follow up on, there was some discussion about possibly expanding the lottery into other countries, or the idea of maybe even Australia or the UK. Last year we talked about that. Just wondered what the discussion was like amongst you and your peers from other states since the last time we were here.
Well, currently Powerball is sold in 46 U.S. jurisdictions, plus Puerto Rico, plus the Virgin Islands. And the addition of Australia, which should happen by the end of this fiscal year, is really no different than adding California or New York, if you look at the population.
Right. So there is an intent to expand into Australia. So what I'm saying is that it wouldn't technically be within the 48 plus the other 2 you said. It would actually be Australia as well.
The decision to add additional jurisdictions was a vote taken by the board members of the Multi-State Lottery Association. And once they passed that resolution, we either drop out of Powerball or we're part of that consortium.
Right. A couple other quick questions. Can a member of the General Assembly win the lottery if they bought a ticket if it was in excess of $1 billion?
Unless you are related to anyone who works for the Tennessee Lottery or one of our major procurement vendors, or live in the same household as someone who does.
Right.
Otherwise, I believe you would be eligible to win.
Thank you. I do have a tendency to buy a lottery ticket
Oh,
after it gets over $1 billion, just because why not me, to be honest. But I did think that it was interesting to do that. One of the things we heard in sports wagering, and there's a lot of comparisons between the two. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me a lot was the total dollar numbers that are wagered in online sports gambling. My question is obviously your business is not able to transact in the same way, either through an app or through a debit card. What is the current total gross sales for the Tennessee portion of those lottery and gaming?
We will be over 2 billion. Andy, do you have that exact figure?
Yeah, we're projecting this year between 2 billion and 63 million in sales this fiscal year on average.
Okay, so we stood up a new entity 2 years ago. That entity has, the only differentiation is between being able to do it cash electronically and doing it cash, and they have exceeded you by almost $1 billion. Is that correct?
Well, almost double. We'll be at 2 billion and they, according to the presentation you just heard, 3.8 billion. But there are lots of differences. I think they return 68 million in privilege tax and we'll return over $500 million. So there's a big difference in the amount of dollars that go to good causes.
Comparatively speaking, would you say it's a good deal for the taxpayer to be in wagering as compared to the lottery?
I think the lottery's a good deal.
Yeah.
But thank you for that question.
Yeah. I just think it's a difference between, you know, what they say, $6.5 million in fees and $68 million in privilege tax. You're talking about $75 million in net revenues, and you're over almost $500 million on less money. So, anyways, thank you for the opportunity to ask questions today. Appreciate your hard work.
Representative Miller, you're recognized next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, President, Director. I can recall 19 years ago when we met and you were hired by the state of Tennessee. And even then I saw, well, we've just pulled off a coup. We've hired the best. We had hit the lottery. And even today, I think you're still probably, if not the best in the nation, especially based on those numbers that you've just given us. You've mentioned at least 10% of the Powerball and Mega Millions generates our revenue. Is that comparable to other states, would you know?
Depending on the urban nature of your state will depend on what products your games come from. So, you know, states like New York or even cities, New York City, Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago, have much larger draw-based sales, either 3 and 4 digit numbers games, Powerball, Mega Millions, where the states without those huge urban populations tend to have more of their sales in instant tickets. So it's very different depending on the population mix of your state.
Exactly. So based on that, an individual in New York that purchases a Powerball ticket has a better chance than an individual purchasing a Powerball in Tennessee.
Not really. We just had a winner of a $1.3 billion Mega Millions jackpot from a town in Maine with like 600 people.
Okay.
That should have been in Tennessee. It was in Maine.
Exactly. But the question becomes only if we're doing 10%, and Tennessee is a part of the Mega Million Authority. Is that something that our board, your board, decide we want to become a member of that of the multi-state board?
We're not a member of the Mega Millions Consortium. We're a member of the Powerball group. There are 2 separate groups and you're a member of one or the other. And we're a member of the group that runs Powerball. And so in Powerball, the 38 people like me would vote on that. And depending on the statute in that state, would depend on whether or not they went to the board for approval or if they could make that decision on their own. But we're not 10% of Powerball sales. Powerball and Mega Millions are 10% of our sales.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I understood that. Okay, last question. You mentioned earlier that these slot machines that are dripping into the state at our borders, and they are illegal. Could you expound on that a little bit? Thank you.
we call them gray machines because they're legal if they don't pay out cash. But if you don't pay out cash, you probably won't have any play. So there are law enforcement in some jurisdictions who are setting up stings, but it's an interesting issue that we'd love to figure out a way to stop, and the only way to stop them is to arrest them.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me reverse the question. You talked about 42 states having the ability to use the debit or credit card. Have you heard or do you know of any issues that they are having using those credit cards or debit cards?
Absolutely none. No, I mean, most of them, the statute's silent, so they've used debit or credit since the beginning. Some of the statutes say no credit, but there have been absolutely no issues that I have heard of from any jurisdiction, but debit is considered in banking as the same as cash. So there just haven't been any issues whatsoever.
So then we just need to do debit and credit.
Well, I'm not advocating for credit. I'm only advocating for debit.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'm going to apologize to the committee ahead of time. I'm going to go there. Okay. So it is the child of avarice, the brother of iniquity, and the father of mischief. It has been the ruin of many worthy families, the loss of many a man's honor, and the cause of suicide. To all those who enter the list, it is equally fascinating. The successful gamester pushes his good fortune until it is overtaken by a reverse. The losing gamester, in hopes of retrieving past misfortune, goes on from bad to worst. George Washington, after doing a little gambling as a younger man, you've done a wonderful job at the task you've been set by the legislature. Before we jump into adding debit cards, credit cards, or anything else, where someone could very easily drain every bit of savings that they have on a huge jackpot, where mathematically it doesn't matter if they buy one ticket or 400 tickets. Mathematically, I would just urge us all caution before we jump into those turbulent waters. Thank you, ma'am, for the job that you do.
All right. Thank you, Pastor Lamberth. And I see no other questioners on my list. Thank you, Director Paul. Again, I think, I wasn't in the legislature 19 years ago, but I was in Tennessee, and there was a very heated discussion about the viability, the moral turpitude or lack of whatever, it's a lottery, but I think that without question, it has proven to be profitable for the state, and the state has used that profit to take care of educating our citizens. So, and it's like other vices, people are going to do it. It's so this question, at least in this way, we're able to get some benefit back to Tennesseans. And my mother would be appalled to hear me say that. But without further ado, there has been a motion to adjourn. I see no objection. It's non-objectionable. Anyway, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I do need to remind you, 9 o'clock in the morning, we begin the good times again. 9 o'clock.